Okay, good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, April 8th, 2023. Today, we're going to begin by first talking about the Saturday Free School's upcoming events, our plans for the year, including a journal. And then after we give updates on some of the upcoming events and other plans, we'll move into the conversation that we gave a little preview about last week, which is about philosophy, how it relates to contemporary physics and artificial intelligence, and we'll do that by going back to Hegel's Science of Logic. So it's a pretty exciting day. I'm really excited to get back to Hegel. I feel like this time will be a much more interesting understanding and reading of Hegel, since we've thought about so much in between the last time we read Hegel. But to start things off, I will turn it to Jeremiah to give some updates on the journal.
Yeah. So I can give some updates on the people can also chime in, but
You're breaking up, Jerry.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is something that is currently in the works. So we are still figuring out a lot of the details and the overall planning of it. But something that we're working on for the next couple months is to launch a new journal of the Saturday Free School. And the title of the journal is going to be called Avant-Garde, a Journal for Peace, Democracy, and Philosophy. And so part of the thinking behind this is that, as people may have seen, like, we have published a few things through various outlets and sites, including like the OPP blog, as well as other places. But I think especially since the 10th anniversary, I think people in the Free School have been feeling that there's really an opportunity for us to really disseminate the ideas and to really commit ourselves to being part of the ideological struggle in various different ways. And so, yeah, this is an idea that we've been talking about and working on. But yeah, so we're thinking of, basically having a journal that is of the Free School and is used as a kind of a vehicle and a platform for the Free School and the ideas that we have to offer, which we think are very critical for this time and can contribute something really important to the overall ideological landscape and what we see in terms of the possibilities of this moment, in terms of, the formation of a new American people, the possibilities of a new world order. And I think that all of us feel very deeply that the Free School, it's not just that we have a unique perspective, but and maybe Doc and others can talk about this more, but that, this use of the title of avant-garde has a very particular connotation. And actually, this was Doc's idea. And I think when I first heard it, I think for a lot of people, the word avant-garde kind of has a connotation of like postmodern art, basically, kind of like abstract or nonsensical postmodern art. But actually, I think this idea came from a lot of our engagement with avant-garde jazz recently in the past couple months, and what that actually shows in terms of the Free School itself being at the forefront of the ideological struggle, the struggle for ideas, and the struggle for the future. And so, this is something that we're working on. We want to try to set up website and have to start really strong, I think, in the fall with a big issue where we'll have some articles that we're working on. And we'll also be able to publish, I think, more of presentations from the past couple events, including the 10th anniversary, the Black Reconstruction Symposium, the Korea event, all of which I think have been very important for the Free School ideologically in terms of consolidating and developing our ideas and where we actually stand. But also what we think is our contribution to the American people and the contribution of the right ideas that can be used by the people in order to advance their own possibility. And so I think Jahan, Michelle, Doc, and I have been talking about this. We met last week to kind of sketch out the initial framing of this, but we're planning to launch this, I think, sometime around the fall with like a big splash launch. But there's definitely going to be more details to come, but this is something that is currently in the works. But yeah, Doc, Michelle, Jahan, if also, I'm sure you guys have stuff to add.
The only thing I would add is that I'm also really excited about, I think, the conceptual framework of avant-garde. And Jeremiah, I think when we had talked about it, you had mentioned, I actually didn't know this about the concept of avant-garde, but you had mentioned it as the vanguard of the vanguard. But really, I think emphasizing the creativity and then also the vitality of free school, and the way that we move. And I just think on a personal level, like, I'm very, very excited by this concept. And I think it will be a very fruitful, but also a serious endeavor in terms of a contribution to the ideological struggle, but then also to the sharing and then the development of knowledge. Because I think Doc had also mentioned that, yes, we want to publish like transcripts from past speeches, also interviews, also presentations, and also to encourage people to write. But he also, I think, Doc, like, you also did a really good job on emphasizing the role of art, or the indispensable role of art in our creative movement forward. Because the concepts that we developed over the last year, for example, like achieving our new nation or a new American people, I think it's really heightened artistically, like the way that I experience and see the world. And I think it has led me to feel much more bonded to, even, for example, avant-garde jazz as like a musical tradition. So I really see it all coming together, and I think this is a really unique and great opportunity, and I know I'm excited to work on it. And yeah, because sorry, the point I was trying to make is, like, Doc, I know you had also mentioned like art, basically, like also using this as a way to spread and develop art as well, photographs, like, etc. Yeah, but I think that was a great explanation, Jeremiah.
Yeah, just to add, I think, some more context. Yeah, part of this, as Michelle was saying, is like, one, the kind of contribution that we think the free school can make, and really trying to maximize the potential of free school. Because yeah, this is something that I've been realizing over the past couple of months, but especially since the 10th anniversary, that whether it's in terms of art, or the ideas themselves and all of that intersecting, yeah, I just realized that the free school, like, as a group of people, like, we have so much, and I think Emily has used this word, like, it's like brain power, like brain power, but like human potential, I think, too. And I think, I know that, yeah, people have had experience with like writing articles, obviously writing presentations, and I think that, yeah, like, whether it's like writing an actual like new article from scratch, or turning a presentation into something that you want to be read, or I think we have other ideas in terms of what we can do with media, like video, archives, all of that kind of thing, and we want to bring all of this together. Yeah, I think this is hopefully a venue for also the potential of people in free school to be fully developed, and also for, yeah, because we're trying to figure out like what's going to be an appropriate format. Like, right now we're thinking of doing like issues or editions like maybe every 3 months or every couple months, not like too frequently, but yeah, to have people in the free school to like work together on, developing, brainstorming ideas, working on articles together, because I think that is an important part of political development, and it's just a really exciting part of the process, I think. And so yeah, this is something that, yeah, we're really excited about. But yeah, you'll definitely hear more as we like kind of figure out the structure of this. Also develop more of the kind of basic principle and vision of the journal itself, like building on this idea of avant-garde. how this also relates to, yeah, like I think some of the really important ideas that the free school has been developing for the past couple months in particular, just because I know, like speaking for myself, I just feel like in the free school, like it's like the world is developing with a certain velocity, but also the free school has been developing with a certain velocity in the past couple months. And I think this is a way to capture that, and to actually like amplify it, because there are a lot of journals out there. There's a lot of news outlets and like magazines and all this kind of thing, which are trying to address different questions. But one of the strengths that we have in the free school, which people I think maybe underestimate because they only interact with us online, but one of the real strengths of the free school is that not only are we just like people who meet online, actually, like the real strength is that we are rooted in the life of Philadelphia, and we're actually rooted in the community of Philadelphia. And yeah, I think we're trying to work out like how exactly can we also make this something which is addressed to the community, while also engaging with this broader like ideological landscape that we find ourselves in, and actually trying to develop clarity, which is not just for ourselves, but clarity that can be used by the people themselves, in order to advance their struggle. And so yeah, that's something that I'm also really excited to see how we can translate that into the way that we publish, the way that we frame this journal, and the kind of purpose that it serves, and how all of us like fit into that purpose. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I agree, and I just wanted to add one last thing, which is that I think the project of avant-garde also really represents, or it also really underscores a quality which I think is very, very unique about Free School, especially as a political organization, which is that we're highly generative, which I've always thought, but I also think we're becoming very artistic as a group. And yeah, like this thing about just being on the cusp and always living between things as they have been, the way they are now, and then what they could be, like always kind of transgressing those worlds, is just a quality that I see so much in Free School now. And I think that I have not ever really seen this in any other political organization that I've interacted with or been a part of. But I also think that it is actually a necessary quality of revolutionary politics or revolutionary practice, is this creative, or you could even say like artistic element. Yeah, that's all.
Has been appropriated in the postmodern period to a kind of postmodernist approach to art, where people would say, for instance, in painting, Basquiat constitutes avant-garde, or in music, people would even go so far as to say, well, punk rock is avant-garde, that anything that is deconstructive is avant-garde. But actually, the concept avant-garde always, as I experienced it, of course it's French, comes out of the French Revolution, and in particular, the most left wing of the French Revolution, such as Robespierre and the communards or the communist wing, but it's always associated with the struggle of ideas and the search for advanced ideas, be they in politics, be they in science, be they in philosophy, be they in art and music. And that's why that wing of jazz that appears in the mid to late 50s, and then throughout the 60s, which was the most advanced music, took on the name avant-garde. Proudly so, by the way. So it is a reclaiming of that idea and that practice in a moment where the struggles for peace and democracy are so central, but also where philosophy, not in its bourgeois, petty bourgeois sense, but in the sense of philosophy as another form of ideological and political struggle. So I think, and then, there's so much that members of the Free School have written for OPP. We have to archive that, make all of this available. There's a huge body of work associated with the life of the Free School, which we want to make available to as many people as possible. And certainly, this must be a journal that addresses young people in particular. And it can't, just frankly, I'll just put it this way, can't be from my point of view, because the music I like and listen to might not be the music that most young people like and listen to. And I'm not hating, you know what I'm saying? I'm congratulating. But you know what I'm saying? And I know it will be that. And it's a very exciting thing. And it represents another development of the Free School. But I think it will show that the ideas of the Free School have traction and resonance among people all over this country and all over the world. For people to know that there are people like us who think the way we do will encourage people not to give up. Not to give up. And that's a great problem for the younger generation, that you can't win, that everything is doomed to fail, and all of that. And then, of course, in places like India, for them to know that that there is this kind of thinking in the United States, but that, yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting because it clarifies the fact that the ideological struggle is paramount and important, and that ideas are not any wishy-washy or like things that don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll also clarify to the fact that like help articulate and define the situation that young people in this moment is, and how young people are in, is what I'm saying. But I'm excited for that.
I also like the name avant-garde because I had the same thought as Jeremiah, where I was like, oh, avant-garde, because I'm used to, my also connotation is like avant-garde art, where it's like Louis Vuitton, like avant-garde fashion, like stuff that like is so far from the people. But I feel like avant-garde, especially with jazz, when you listen to it, it's like, for me, I think avant-garde, and the more I think about it, especially like what you said, Seraphine, about the ideological struggle, avant-garde to me is very fearless, it's courageous, and it's positive.
Right.
It's about generating, it's like what you said, it's like about generating something. And I also feel like that's so important for us, like for that to be the message of us and the way we understand and engage in the ideological struggle, like advancing fearlessly, positively. And that's so important for young people, like for us to be speaking to other young people, like and I actually think, like Herb and I were talking like when we were on mute, where it's just like, I think people are hungry for that. I really think people are hungry for that, especially now. And I think a lot of journals and a lot of like media, I think it's too much engaged in this thing of thinking that like the low bar is enough for young people. It's not. Like the high, like the sky, like that is what young people deserve. And I feel like for us to carry that banner of avant-garde, like courageously and like positively, like almost to me it also has this vibe of like freedom, like we're free, we're free to like imagine the future and then we're capable of it. I feel like that's what I feel more and more. And the other thing I just wanted to add about why I'm so excited about this journal, Avant Garde, is that I also think that in some ways for a while, the way I also see it is like I feel like free school, we have such a unique worldview. One that is so optimistic in the way that King was optimistic. And like understanding the stakes of humanity and just being so optimistic because of our faith and belief in humanity, and that we already have a huge amount of human potential and human capacity, to build a new world and build a new America. And I feel like this is our opportunity to kind of, in the journal, try to explain these kind of knowledge categories and this philosophy that we feel like we share, but maybe we haven't necessarily done the best job at like being explicit about. And I feel like this is through the journal, I'm excited to like for it to be made clearer. Because I feel like in some ways it's similar. Like obviously it's different because we're free school, but it's kind of the way like when you read Freedom Ways, like when you read Freedom Ways or even The Crisis, like it's supposed to like what it does is it gives you like a certain worldview too. And you just even look at the covers of The Crisis magazine or Freedom Ways and the kind of articles that are in there and the way people are taking seriously in engagement and the ideas or assumptions people have or taking stances, and like people are hungry for that. And I think it's really beautiful that we're taking that up. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, just oh, sorry, go ahead, Magda.
Well, I was just going to say that we just live in a time where so much thinking is dictated by the state. And I always think that, Doc and Catherine always say this is the least free environment I've seen, the most repression. And just people don't even realize how what they're thinking is so guided by, the US deep state and military industrial complex, like their philosophies, their ways of viewing other people, their idea of what is good art and culture. And I feel like you need to go to avant-garde. Like you need something to break out of all this. Because, this is also what it's about. We believe people can think for themselves. And when people are educated, they can govern, they can create a better world. And especially I think it's going to be important also in the context of which we're going to have about the AI. How there's so much like thought itself is being dictated by machines, but it's really so ideological. So like just to say, no, the human is central. We believe in people. We believe in our capacity to think and understand, and write and produce ideas in art and literature. I think it's an affirmation of that.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that I'm really glad that Emily brought up Freedom Ways and The Crisis, because when I was in college and like doing research for papers and stuff, I encountered those journals. And I think so Crisis was co-founded by Du Bois, or founded by Du Bois. Freedom Ways was founded by Du Bois with the Jacksons, like Esther and James Jackson. And that was the first time that I think I'd ever encountered art by Charles White and people like that. And yeah, I think that it's really important for in like, yeah, the thing that I'm really excited about, it's like in every avenue possible of expression, I just feel like the free school has so much to give and so much to contribute. And I'm also glad that Magna brought up the AI thing, because you guys know like ChatGPT. I signed up for it and I started like chatting with it. And this is gonna sound kind of funny, but I asked it to write like a response in the style of Du Bois to the 2016 election of Trump. And what it spat out was basically just like it was like almost like a university like PR statement about like, we do not abide by racism, xenophobia, homophobia, and yada yada yada. And Martin Luther King said that the arc of the universe is long, it bends towards justice, and we cannot be silent. And but yeah, because the way that these AI, which are based on language networks, language models work, is that everything is probabilistic. So it's basically doing statistical analysis of like what is the most likely thing to be said in like a certain context or in a certain like if you have one word, what would be the probability of the next word and that kind of thing. And I just like that idea in part because I've been thinking of it's almost like the free school so like obviously the AI is getting that kind of language from somewhere, right? It's getting it basically from like the internet, from the kind of discourse that exists in terms of whether it's around Trump or anything. And the kind of funny thing is that to me it was an example of how the free school is almost like it's like we are a rare probability, like we are a rare like something that's kind of rare. And it kind of goes to like the whole Du Boisian thing of law and chance.
Yeah.
Like who could have guessed that like like that the free school would be where it is today, like they would have all these people in it, that we would be developing and applying the ideas of people like Du Bois and King and Robeson and Baldwin in such a creative way, and in such a way which is almost like it's almost like unpredictable, but like there is still a logic to it. And it's just that as Magna was saying, our logic is that of like the human being. And like that is precisely what like the AI models are unable to actually capture, and they can only basically spit out that aspect of our culture and of the discourse and of the ideological landscape, which is the most like almost formulaic, the most like rote, or the most like uncreative. So yeah, I don't know. I was glad you brought up the AI thing, because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, something I wanted to add is this also, our conversation is reminding me of the concept of civilization, because as the free school, and we are also making sense of the world and the emergence of Africa and Asia. And, even as an individual that comes from Chinese civilization, like this concept of civilization made more sense because it's based on this long history. And I think something that that we are understanding is what is American civilization. And like civilization in the sense that, as we discussed in the Korea event, tried to define, which is all encompassing of the ordinary struggles of people in all forms, whether it's in philosophy, whether it's in art, whether it's in music. And part of this also comes to me as a way for us to show the rest of the world as well that there is a civilization in America that is emerging, or we're trying to bring about. And because I think sometimes we fear that with the New World Order, that America is going to be left behind with the ruling class, or at least I have that fear, which is like, oh, the rest of the world is moving towards something positive. I don't want, them to see America and not be able to see like what are the strivings here. And I think in some ways, avant-garde is a way for us to tell the world and to tell people like there is a striving here, and there is something that we're working on in terms of all aspects of people's lives. Like it also reminds me of a conversation we had on Robeson, which is that coming out from like his father coming out from slavery, and then the children. His father always told him to like reach essentially what we're saying, like to really develop human capacity in all forms. That's why you see Robeson as an athlete, as a singer, but also as someone who was aware of the world situation and spoke on principle. And I think that's why the comparison to the Crisis and Freedom Ways was also really apt, to be like, no, there's people here in America that are also trying to be part of this new world order, and to bring about, and to and to also respond in the ways that we've been talking about Hegel as well. That as we're seeing this world situation, we're also trying to change and grow and transform the American people. And so I say all that to say I'm also really excited because it shows that free school also, like, we're trying to be creative and not be stuck in like old ways. We're constantly trying to imagine, I guess, as what Emily was saying earlier, a new world and a new America.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have talked about the meaning of avant-garde. I was really touched by the second part of the title, where the first word that we use is peace. I think peace really grounds us. I think starting from however long I can remember, all our conferences, like China conference, India conference, Vietnam conference, the Korea conference, everything has been so grounded in peace, and we tie and we connect peace with everything. And I think that's extremely important to get out to the people. And I think this is a really great idea for putting a journal out there and really cementing the idea of peace and democracy in the American people. Because I think I really like what Emily said about, we have this really unique outlook, we have this really unique idea, and that's what avant-garde symbolizes. Like this new experimental idea that needs to go out, needs to catch. And I one of the things that I really liked was how peace ties all of this together. How the thing that we have to strive for most in the world is peace, and everything will follow.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because when the Du Bois group were meeting on Monday, we were reading a portion of Black Reconstruction, and it was that question that came up, like, is peace the democratic demand for today? And yeah, that's interesting that you bring it up in the context of the magazine, and like how we're all talking about like that there is this new future that's coming into being, and we're like the thing about new categories and how we will have the opportunity to explain, because still we're giving language, we're giving understanding to other people, young and old, while using the past, like the good essence and the root of the progressive and revolutionary forces of the past, like King, Paul Robeson, Du Bois. So it's like we're grounded in this tradition that hasn't moved or hasn't been, and actually the ruling class has been trying to redefine, smear, and erase all the peace and communist movements from the general knowledge in this moment of history when it's needed the most. But yeah, how the question of peace is actually a democratic demand. And yeah, that's interesting because democracy has everything to do with civilization, like allowing people to fully develop, allowing human beings to be a part of society, not away from it. And the values are actually dependent on human beings instead of above or further from it. So it's like the future means that it's built by human beings rather than by the ruling class or robots. Yeah, that was clarifying.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, I can read some comments unless you want to say something.
Oh, let's read comments and then we'll go on to the next.
Okay, so Todd Doherty, Yvonne, someone named Why Not Learn on YouTube say good morning. Christopher Romero says good morning. Danny Jacobs says there has been avant-garde art in all revolutions. The October Revolution gave Malevich, Bauhaus in Germany, etc., etc. When the world is thrown upside down, avant-garde provokes thought.
Yeah.
And he says, even how people taste food changes in revolutions, and cooking is an art. The French Revolution, for instance, had a notable impact on French cuisine.
Oh.
BK on YouTube says, youth come into the world not knowing anything about limits or what is, quote, not possible. Society programs limits into the mind of the youth for various reasons. And therefore, avant-garde removes limits in art as far as what defines genres of art. Avant-garde is, in a sense, the evolution and progression of art. And then Jake Harris says, good morning. And then, yeah, one thing I wanted to add is that, you know, part of the reasoning behind, another part of the reasoning behind this term of avant-garde is that I think what is, you know, even what you can say is like cutting edge or what is innovative or what is new is not what you would expect. You know, it's not what the ruling class would say is avant-garde, which is the whole reason behind the whole postmodern thing, was to define what is cutting edge. And yeah, I like what Serafina was saying in terms of, you know, like what we think is cutting edge is like in some ways what a lot of us experienced when we went to go see August Wilson's play Radio Golf. Like that is what is like at the cutting edge, and it's in a way which is not really predictable, or it's not like what basically what this kind of present culture or the ruling elite would say, but it is the fashioning of something new. And we're trying to help figure out like what is new, like what is cutting edge, what is actually needed for the progression of art, but also for the progression of the human being. And so yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Okay, so I think we're ready to go to the update on the next plans of free school. I think that was our upcoming year of Baldwin, Serafina.
Yeah, there are.
Well, why don't you do Henry Winston? Well, good, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the conversation that we were just having also is a part of us building and making these events. Like I think it'll be in the fall that we're planning a celebration of Henry Winston.
50th anniversary
and the 50th anniversary of Strategy for a Black Agenda. I think there was a title for that, and it would be I don't know if we had. Oh yeah, Henry Winston Strategy for a Black Agenda: Investigations of the New World Order. And in talking about that event, it had a lot to do with this moment of transition that we're in, because we're in regard to last week's Saturday Free School, we were talking about how like this country is changing and the whole thing about AI, but also finishing up Black Reconstruction. But I just feel like with this Henry Winston event, it presents an opportunity to talk about the new categories idea, how the ideological struggle is paramount, and these two concepts that we're kind of throwing around about international democracy and the peace economy. So like the human being, like what is the philosophy, what is the foundation in which the American people stand? These are the questions also on the table, like the question of Trump and what direction will this country go towards? Will it follow fascism, or will it go towards a new type of world order situation? But also, like, what does it mean for the human being in America to know Du Bois and King, meaning that this country operates upon it? upon King, and other things that Doc and Emily can help fill into that conversation about Henry Winston and the strategy for a Black agenda. It'll probably be like a 2-day, but because we're discussing the book Strategy for a Black Agenda, and yeah, that's what I'll say on that day. And we're also preparing for the year of 2024, or like the end of 2023, moving into 2024 in that year. A year to celebrate James Baldwin, and it will be his 100th birthday. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I don't mean to be slow, but
I'm sorry.
No. And I think we had a working title for that, but I'm not.
Yeah, the Baldwin. Can I just say something about the Winston? You know, we did a Winston conference a few years ago, and one of the highlights of that was the documentary that Emile pulled together of Henry Winston. We might expand that, I don't know, but this will be the 50th anniversary of the publication of his work, Strategy for a Black Agenda, which the more you look at it, the more you see how pregnant it is with ideas that I think the more we think about it, the more we can see how it has influenced the way the free school thinks about King and Du Bois and Robeson, and the way, therefore, the way we refuse to accept the colonial thesis or the settler colonial thesis. But all of that, and of course, this will involve us with his other book, which was published a couple of years later, which is called Class, Race, and Black Liberation. And that is a book of essays, but his idea, or Henry Winston's idea, from the anti-slavery to the anti-monopoly coalition, the centrality of peace, just a whole number of things, including the suggestion, although I don't know that it was fully developed in the book, of Lenin and Du Bois, what we call a Lenin-Du Bois synthesis. But so that I think will be very important for the fall, and the year of James Baldwin, 2024, which will be his 100th anniversary. And I think we decided on it. It's kind of the same title we used for a conference in 2017 on Baldwin, but I think it works for this time. It's we would call the conference, the year, James Baldwin, God's Revolutionary Voice. And and that he was. And it would be a year, something like the year of Du Bois, and something like the year of Gandhi. There would be reading groups all over the place, all over the city, and outside of the city. And we would encourage people around the country, perhaps in Chicago, perhaps in Pittsburgh and other places, to declare 2024 the year of Baldwin, and to engage their cities and their communities and their churches, and one would hope their unions, local and international unions, in embracing Baldwin. And of course, again, so much of the way we think in the free school, we are indebted to Baldwin. This concept of a single people emerging out of the ruins of a decadent system of race and class. And it's all over Baldwin. and then Baldwin as a revolutionary thinker, continuing, I would argue, the legacy of Paul Robeson in particular, but becoming Baldwin was a follower and you could say even a disciple of Martin Luther King. So that should be an exciting year. We're just, thinking about it. We haven't put the details to it yet. But at least a year where Philadelphia reads Baldwin, where the people read Baldwin, even people who can't read or don't read, hopefully we'll be able to break through in some of these universities and, of course, the public schools, which will be difficult, by the way. There are obstacles because there are people who want to talk about especially Blackness in the most narrow, dogmatic, and retrograde way, and that is not Baldwin. So that's what we plan to do. We have a lot to work out, and so on. And I guess we'll be reporting back every week or whenever how things look. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Oh, by the way, we're talking about art and literature. There's a case to be made that Baldwin might be the greatest essayist in the English language, certainly the greatest American essayist. And the Black poet Langston Hughes once said to Baldwin, he said, as much as I love your novels and poetry and plays, your essays are your greatest achievement. And I think that's true. And so we'll have a great time of this.
I wanted to piggyback and give an update on the last event that we have planned for the year. Well, now we're talking about 2024, but it's tentatively on June 17th. It's a festival that we had hoped originally to actually have this weekend because I think tomorrow is Paul Robeson's Monday?
9th April,
right? That's tomorrow.
Yeah. So yeah, Sunday, April 9th, which is tomorrow, is Paul Robeson's 125th birthday.
Falls on Easter this year.
Yeah, it falls on Easter this year, which is kind of beautiful in some ways.
Yes, it is.
And we had originally hoped to have an intercivilizational festival today, but we had to change some plans, and we pushed it back to have a little bit more time. And we have a tentative date for it, which is June 17th. We're really excited for that. It's titled A Festival of Music and Art to Celebrate Unconquerable Love, the Magnificent Lives of Paul Robeson and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it's just like we originally conceived of, but I'll kind of give an update again on it. It'll be almost a whole day, basically a whole day of performances. And in particular, it will include avant-garde jazz musicians like Bobby Zankel, who's our friend and who we saw perform, which in some ways is what really triggered us to really think about avant-garde as a futuristic music. And what does it mean to have a futuristic, human-centered philosophy? To really think like that, and how important that is. Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about it with AI, but I just wanted to say, because at first when I found out that we as Free School were going to start talking about artificial intelligence seriously, I kind of was like, I don't get it, like why? But actually it's really important because I started going to a deep dive about the way people are kind of talking about artificial intelligence, and not just like tech people talking about it, but philosophy people, and the way people talk about, well, what does it mean for something to be a human creation? And Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I was in school, like I was in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I think I never took seriously the way, like, basically the colleges of arts and sciences often, I always thought it was kind of funny that arts and sciences are put together, but actually it makes sense. Basically, the whole theme, at least of my college in arts and sciences when I was in school, was the theme of like what makes us human, which I thought was kind of BS back then. But in some ways, there's some sort of truth to it, which is art and science together. It's about philosophy. To talk about the human being includes philosophy, and I think so. Anyways, this is all to say that like there's just one thing I saw in an article someone wrote about artificial intelligence, which is that it's what kind of like what Jeremiah was saying, which is it doesn't matter how technically impressive artificial intelligence is. Artificial intelligence will still, for the most part, be based on what has already been created, even if it tries to, like predict something like new. It will always be based on what has already been created, whereas the human has the capacity to actually, like, I don't know, at least the way I was thinking of it was like we as human beings, because we are human and because we, like, at the end of the day, like what we dream of, conceive of, try to achieve like creatively, we have the capacity for something new for the human being. Like we are the ones capable of creating new categories of knowledge, and that's the way I was kind of seeing it. But anyways, thank you, Bobby Zankel, if you ever watched this live stream, because for me at least, it was really when we went to Bobby Zankel's concert, and like actually Free School went to both nights of his concert, because I think that really triggered something for us in the way we're thinking, even about ourselves. But anyways, this intercivilizational festival to honor Paul Robeson and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, it will include avant-garde musicians, but also other jazz musicians like Alfie Pollett, hopefully, as well as a lot of the performers from our 10th anniversary, like African performers, Asian performers, like the Koreans, the Bangladeshis, the Indians. And what we're trying to, in some ways, talk about is, like, we've talked about things like, what does an Afro-Asiatic reconstitution of the world, of humanity? But also, like, the overarching message is this thing of, like, by bringing all these musicians together, like avant-garde jazz, like these futuristic thinkers and players and dreamers, and then you have like paying tribute to civilization through these African and Asian performers. Like the way we conceived of it is we were thinking about like, this is exactly, we're going to pay homage and put into practice what Robeson dreamed of. And his whole philosophy of, if you want to know what the people's dream, if you want to know the people's dreams, you must know their folk music. You must know their music and their art. And like, I really feel like intercivilizational festival is also celebration of humanity, of the human. And I also think it's beautiful because I also think that is the philosophy of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, this belief in the human to achieve.
It's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, so that's kind of our, like, that's what we've been thinking about with this festival. We're really excited, and we talked about leading up to the festival politically that we wanted to also like connect it to the New World Order that Serafina was also referencing for Henry Winston, talking about international democracy, or you could say democratic internationalism, like the people's dreams, like humanity's march forward, the human being. Yeah, and just that like this concert and festival of art and music is political education. And like we said, even for the avant-garde journal, the same themes of like, we're raising, like, we don't think that especially the youth and children deserve breadcrumbs. What they deserve is a sky. And it's on us, like it's our responsibility to paint that sky, or like, to clearly paint that. And so we also talked about, for the intercivilizational festival, yes, there'll be performances, but we will also talk about these ideas. We will, like, in some ways, we will paint, like we will create the single garment of destiny. And we'll also have like an exhibit of the revolutionary leaders, the African revolutionaries, the Asian anti-colonial movements, the civil rights movement, the Black freedom struggle. Like, we will paint that sky, we'll create that single garment of destiny through this festival. So right now, the tentative date is June 17th. So save the date. And yeah, we'll keep updating everyone on the movements as we move forward. I'm gonna if it's okay with you, Jeremiah, I know it's your role technically. I wanted to, just because I think it connects well, I wanted to read some of Stan Wood's comments about jazz. Because he kind of made me think about what I was going to say for the Intercivilizational Festival just now. But Stan says the music of the jazz avant-garde of the 50s and 60s questioned the assumptions of the status quo. Yeah, I really love that. And then he also said, as an essayist, it's about Baldwin. As an essayist, Baldwin was influenced by Richard Wright, one of his greatest mentors, who interestingly was influenced by Henry Louis Mencken.
Mencken, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I really liked the comment about jazz, avant-garde jazz, questioning the assumptions of the status quo. And I also wanted to, if you think it's right, Doc, I was going to pass it to Meghna to talk about how we'll also be honoring Paul Robeson in Chicago.
Yes, I wanted to mention some exciting updates for a free school event in Chicago. So we will be also honoring the legacy of Paul Robeson in Chicago, specifically at the wonderful DuSable Museum, which was founded by Margaret Burroughs, who is a comrade of Paul Robeson. And just everything we talk about, the tradition of civil rights and labor and peace, very strong in Chicago, in people's consciousness. So as soon as I've been telling people we want to celebrate Paul Robeson, they're not only do they say, when is it, can I come? They say, how can I help? So everybody who I've talked to has been absolutely wonderful. The DuSable Museum, as soon as we started telling them, this is organized also by Neha Chibukula, who's also a part of Free School. And as soon as we started telling them we want to celebrate Robeson, not just him as a musician, but him as a thinker, the way that he thinks the connection between peace and the struggle against racism, the struggle for freedom, the struggle for a peace economy, not a war economy, the struggle for art and culture, just like Emily was saying, as a celebration of the human, as a basis of what's to come if humanity is freed. So they were just like, yes, we would love to partner with you, which was so exciting. And as soon as also so what we envision is Neha is putting together a documentary, kind of the same way Emil put one together for Henry Winston, really just letting people hear what he had to say in his own words. Like, unlike other documentaries we've been seeing, there's a lot of spin trying to make sense of how could he be a communist, and we have to kind of apologize for it. But I think we're going to be very unapologetic and just this is what he said. If you have an issue, then you have an issue with Paul Robeson. So putting together his original speeches and clips on peace and democracy and art and culture and civilization. But also after that, we wanted to have a panel. And what's really interesting is when I started telling the education director, I think her name is Dr. Kim Laney, but when I started telling her about the panelists, she started laughing and she said, "You've invited all my friends." So we, like in the same vein of the Free Schools event, we also wanted to invite Minister Ishmael Mohammed, who's a student minister, one of the leading ministers at the Chicago branch of the Nation of Islam. I think one of the leading ministers in the country. And we went to his service last Sunday, and he just gave this incredibly moving sermon about it was about the armor, like the armor you need to struggle in this world against white supremacy. And it was a very deep, very moving sermon. I think Nathan can also speak about it because he was also there. And Caleb also came, and the warmth with which we were received was just phenomenal. They said it just like that. We want to free the darker nations of the world. We're preparing for the world to come. Like, how must we be? How must we improve ourselves, lift ourselves up, make ourselves worthy of this great cause that was espoused by the minister Honorable Minister Elijah Muhammad. So we would be really excited. We sent a formal invitation, and the Dusable Museum also said they would help us. We also wanted to invite Father Michael Flager, this really incredible pastor who's, speaking of sacrifice, he has sacrificed a lot to take the stances he has taken for the Black community and just for freedom and justice and peace in the legacy of Dr. King, which is something he talks about a lot. We also really wanted to ask Alice Palmer, who was this great peace activist in Chicago, who was kind of stabbed in the back by Barack Obama. So I think she can speak very well to the true tradition for Black liberation and anti-imperialism. And she was also, I believe, part of the World Peace Council. So completely, and when I told this to the people at Dusable, they were just like, she would be the best because she was literally, they were all part of the same movement, the same circle. And we would also, of course, like to invite Dr. Montero to come and speak as someone who was also part of the same circles and who has been a participant in this history. So they also were thinking about some other people. They really envision it as being a collaboration. So I think it's something we will have to navigate, but I think we've got a strong hand because the message of peace and the struggle against racism, and also the idea, I think as we've been reading Robeson's work, it's just astounding how much he believes in the American people. It's almost like he doesn't consider the working class as white. It's really interesting the way that he thinks about race and class, who he considers his people, and the way he understands his own people and his own freedom struggle. I think it's just absolutely beautiful, and people need to hear it for themselves in his own words. Like he says, racism. I experienced racism with the blue bloods of Princeton, in the halls of Congress. But he does, yeah. It's really amazing, and I think anybody who reads him will have to really think very critically about the times we live in. So that's the plan for now. It's a developing situation, and I really hope everybody in Free School can come to Chicago. On the date is May 25th, and they're giving us this huge auditorium, and it's just really fantastic. So I'm very excited, but also just trying to stay on post.
It's so funny.
Don't laugh at me, dog, please. Not on live stream. You can laugh after.
Nice. I'm so excited to go to Chicago.
Yeah.
We should plan out our tickets. I feel like a lot of us have been waiting to go to Chicago together. So it makes sense that we're coming for Paul Robeson and what sounds like a really amazing event. And yeah, our first Free School event in Chicago. This is cool.
We should mention, maybe Purba could, what Raju and Nanditha are planning in India for Robeson.
But I think it might be better for Meghna to talk about it. But yeah, I know they're doing events in India also, maybe one online event to sort of bring Paul Robeson back into the consciousness of India. It used to be so big. I mean, there was this big celebration of his 60th birth anniversary under Indira Gandhi. But since then, it seems like there has been a decline in that memory. And people, even, the left circles, the most radicals, they don't really know Robeson. I think the most prevalent idea in India right now is he was a musician, he was a singer, but he was so much more than that. And the people of India knew that. And there were songs that were sung, and we grew up even learning, but not realizing that captured his true spirit and his struggle against imperialism and for peace. So I guess the idea, and Meghna can go a little bit more into the details. The idea is to have an online event, a Free School online event, where we bring Robeson, and his deep connections with the Indian anti-colonial and the tradition that came out of the Indian freedom struggle, and reintroduced Robeson the man through that lens to the Indian people. and then also, I guess, an in-person event which would have panels and so on. But I'll let Meghna maybe talk a little more about the details.
No, that's about as much as I know. It's an ongoing situation, and I know they've been working really hard. But yeah, I mean, it's almost like the free school has to teach people about his legacy, because a lot of people who are like so-called left, they just don't know. They really don't. And yeah, I mean, I think also they've invited a woman named Margaret Alva. I don't know if you know her, Doc, but she was very much involved in the Indira movement and part of the world peace movement. So I think she will be speaking at the in-person meeting. Yeah, maybe they can come on live stream and talk about it sometime for themselves. But Doc, you might even know more about it than
No, only what you tell me. And I, just where it's more difficult for them than it is for us. And they're standing up. That is Nanditha and Raju. They're standing up is really heroic, and it is the fight for the future of India. Literally, it is a fight for the future of India. And to introduce Robeson into Indian political life at this time as integral to the fight for India's future. And that is the point, that Robeson, and of course Indira, but once you say Robeson, you say Gandhi, you say Nehru, you say Indira, because they're all a part of the same generation. And this great fight for India's future. And it is, India's future is being fought for as we speak. And Raju and Nanditha are right in the middle of that. And it is not easy for them. It's difficult, but they're standing up unbelievably courageously.
So I think that was a summation of all of our all of our plans for free school for the year. It's actually a lot.
Yeah.
I'm excited, but it's definitely a lot. Yeah, I just want to kind of also just say that I know I said I'm excited about everything, but I mean it, and I really mean it for the year of Baldwin as well. Baldwin's 100th anniversary, I think, will be really special. And I think just like Robeson and King and Du Bois, when we talk about like reminding not just America, but the world of their importance to the world and to humanity, like I feel like James Baldwin is so important to that. And I know for me, like I'm just really excited about Philadelphia reads Baldwin, and then people in Chicago reading too, people in India reading Baldwin. And so I'm really looking forward to the 100th anniversary of James Baldwin and actually giving him the real props that he's due in the way it should be.
Mhm.
But if there aren't any comments, or if
Yeah. I wanna share some enthusiasm with you guys. Yeah. Man, when I think of the rich possibility of going out to spread the good word of James Baldwin and be ingrained in the lives of people in Philadelphia, I view it from like three beautiful perspectives. One, the obvious of we're sharing ideas that we think can transform the city of Philadelphia and the world. And two, I compare what it's like to be a part of people's lives and build trust from the way that I look at Madre Jessie here in Philadelphia. People in general have so much skepticism and lack of distrust. They don't know where you're coming from. They don't know what you're going to do. And what I think wins people over is just being so straightforward, being so kind and open, and just showing that you care and you want to be in service to people. Not that you're trying to trick them to get them to do something for you because you're doing something for them. And just the fact that if there's people in Philadelphia that say, you know what, we care about you, we want to be in communion with you, and we want to think together. I think that even if people won't necessarily, not every the people that come will feel that way, and people that see it that don't necessarily make it, they'll be like, you know, I do feel like someone does give a shit about me and the city of Philadelphia. And I would not be surprised to see a positive shift in attitude in places like schools, especially where you're supposed to have someone care about you and show you something that is not happening. So I'm most excited right now about the year of Baldwin, and when I'm sure I'm gonna get hyped about everything though.
You know, actually, to add to that point, Eddie, the shift in attitude, because when Emily was speaking, I was also thinking about the year of Du Bois, and year of Gandhi and stuff, and like it just allowed Philly to stand upon something, you know, and in a moment when people aren't standing on ideas or like principles, like there's still a tradition and ideas to stand on. So I think, yeah, there's something to what Emily was saying, that the year of Baldwin is going to be significant in progressing the thought, or allowing like the foundation to grow stronger, in a general understanding, like what you're saying, shift of attitude that like people need, like the human, like what is thought about. Like it's sort of like when we're talking about like when people want avant-garde, like the magazine, people are like are thirsty for ideas. It'll be interesting to see how Baldwin will affect that kind of situation. What do people think about, and how is it articulated? Having the opportunity to teach and learn is also going to be a learning process, and an opportunity for like the free school to try out ideas, experiment, learn, and meet new people, be able to connect the world together, like Chicago, India, Philly. Yeah, it's a definite, and it's also like over the course of time. So like with the year of Baldwin and like reading groups, we met with people that we wouldn't have normally seen ever, and built relationships with them. Had different, I still remember reading with Doc at the free library of Souls of Black Folk, and like that'll just be in my mind and in my heart. So it's like opportunities like that. That shift of attitude means that like there's memories of human bonding, which is like really significant and deep, because it connects everyday people and their struggles to the struggles to struggle really towards a new future that is also being seen. And people have questions like, what do I do? How do I operate? What's going on? And like people talk about it, so it's another opportunity to expand, or sort of in a way it expands like the opportunities of talking about these ideas, but it centralizes and grounds everybody to one source, which is a struggle for like peace and democracy, and it concretizes for me that the free school as a political organization is also something, like not like political organization, but just at least a center where there's like thought that can be worked out, and these events and the year of Baldwin will help do that more. So
yeah, I wanted to say on the year of Baldwin, it's also an exciting idea, because I think the last time we did an event on Baldwin was now, I think, several years ago. I mean, obviously Baldwin has been significant for many of the conferences we've done, but I think I remember the last time we did one was, I think, in 2017, probably.
17.
Yeah, and which was one of the first conferences that I had come to as well. But I think from 2017 until now, we've using Baldwin as well as Du Bois and King and other Robeson, we've developed ideologically a lot since then. And obviously, the situation in the country and the world has changed so much. But what I'm excited is coming into the year of Baldwin with this slogan that we've been talking about: "We march to achieve our nation."
Right.
And just that, bringing that concept to all the readings of Baldwin and all the reading groups and conferences, I think is going to, and as well as Avant-Garde, the journal, is going to be a huge thing, and is really going to differentiate. I mean, that's from the typical left or activist ideological perspective, and I think it's going to be very, very important because, as I think people were pointing to earlier as well, like they, in the universities and some extent in schools, they'll try to frame Baldwin in such a narrow way. Either through, now they're trying to use a lens of queerness or whatever. Other times that you try to use Afro-pessimism or other things. But bringing this revolutionary Baldwin, this transformative Baldwin, this Baldwin who is going to be fundamental to the the creation or the reconstruction of a new American people, with this idea of achieving our nation, I think is so deep. Because I've never not heard anybody else talk about it. None of the other so-called experts on Baldwin until we talked about it at the 10th anniversary. This phrase that comes from one of Baldwin's essays. I think it's the title of one of his essays.
Yeah, that's really deep because our country is supposedly going through a racial reckoning, but you don't really hear Baldwin's name.
Nope.
He's like he's the original racial reckoning, theorist and like thinker. And it's just really interesting because, I mean, Baldwin actually believed, like he said, this will be the last white nation. Like we have to, basically he said we have to stop being white, or white people have to stop being white. What does that mean? And I don't think any like proponent of like any, mainstream person who's lifted up by, mainstream media actually has that concept of what does it mean to be white and what does it mean to give up whiteness.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and also this is reminding me because like what you're saying, Jahan, about how we did Baldwin in 2017 and now we're doing it in 2024, like everything is expanded. Like Henry Winston, we can talk about him in an expanded way, like new categories of knowledge, philosophy, like there's and the same thing about Baldwin, like how we talked about the avant-garde and the creative generating and also the potential of the free school, the arts and so on. That's all Baldwin too, like the plays, the poetry, the music. Like there's all these ways to know and understand and learn from Baldwin. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Go ahead, Jerry. No, this idea, and I think it is so palpable in the free school, so immediately clear when you encounter the free school, is that we think the future is not just a fight against, but a fight for.
Yeah.
There is a future that can be fought for. And to fearlessly stand up on that principle alone separates you from the ruling class ideology, the deep state ideology, which is trying to convince especially the young generation there's nothing to fight for, or this sense that the only thing we can do is to fight against, which leads you into anarchism. I would even say Trotskyism, we'll debate that. But this fighting for, and Baldwin is like Robeson, this great optimist. There is a way out. It's just we have so much to bring to the people and to the younger generation, to the younger generation, who I think more than any other part of the American people are hoping, sometimes against hope, that somebody somewhere can help them find a way out.
Oh, for sure.
And the parents of young people are hoping, I think a lot of people are hoping for something like the free school. I really do. And this is what makes it all so beautiful, so and even for ourselves, we can fight for this. We can fight for this. We know how to fight for this. We've been doing this. We know how to do it. And we just have to perfect our ability to reach the people more and more. So that's what I would say.
No, that really touches me. Also thinking about younger people around. And it is the fight for that's actually really important. Because in a lot of ways people are trying, like, how, like it's with everything. Like, how do you do anything if you're not able to have a purpose for it?
Do anything.
And it's a lot of conversations, but that I've been having with other people, like the same thing with like one of my people that I work with, and her whole thing with making films, like, why is it important to make films about everyday ordinary people? Like, why is it really important? Well, that's a philosophical and ideological question that has a foundation in King, that has a lineage, and it can be explained, it can be developed, and it reminded me back to the conversation that we might have, or might not have, about AI, and that the probability thing that Jeremiah pointed out. There's two philosophical bases in which it's like either on a set of notions that had happened, or on a set of notions that you define and create based on what you know. Meaning the creative capacity of the human being, rather than the what is material or what is known as a fact by a robot. It's two philosophical things. Like time in itself can totally end to a robot. Like, there is no time, there can't be. But for a human being, there's always like memories, there's like dreams and things. So it's like different. It's a different set of worldview. But that is really important. There is a for.
There is a for.
Yeah, like there's we fight for something.
Yes.
We march to achieve our nation. And that's the deeper part of like the Korean event. The filmmaker, she had brought it up. Well, I don't like the fact that, it's just anti, for the Black Lives Matter thing or whatever it was. But the deeper essence of it is the fact that, one, there's ideological preparation that goes into asking what are the demands that meet the moment today, and also how did we get here? What is the moment that we're in, that we're struggling, and why are we struggling against what we're struggling against? Like, you study for these things, like Black Reconstruction, and as in, like, you study Black Reconstruction to understand clearer the moment that we're in, rather than dismissing an author because he's a communist. There's two, like, basically what we're presenting is the fact that when we are able to study, it is not for a dogma but it is for the liberation to create the new world that is also coming. So, yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say, I think people may have already seen, but we recently published a series of interviews that we did with Catherine Blunt, who's part of the Free School, and you can find them on the OPP blog website. But one of the things that was highlighted from when we talked with Catherine, who's born and raised in North Philly, I think, and how she described her upbringing in around the 50s, that time period, is that she would talk about how it was so common for young people, like, one, to be nurtured by the community, by the schools, by their families, but also for a young person like Catherine, when she was a kid or a teenager, to hear about, the world, like the freedom movements, the world anti-colonial movement, the world peace movement that was happening, like to hear it through your relatives, to hear about it even in the news at that time. And there's a way that you can read that history through her, and to be like, oh, and to be kind of pessimistic, and to say like, oh, like things aren't the same now, like no one cares anymore, and everything has basically changed for the worse. But that's it's almost a deterministic way of viewing things. It's a very pessimistic way of viewing things. And the way that we think in the Free School is actually like, no, we can be part of creating that kind of atmosphere, that kind of environment in Philadelphia again. And because history, if anything, shows us what is possible. And whether it's the year of Baldwin reading, all of the events that we're doing, the Avant-Garde Journal, I think we are operating under the belief that all of this can be created, that actually the conditions are more right than they've ever been for the creation of this kind of atmosphere in the city of Philadelphia, in places like Chicago, and also around the nation. And yeah, I'm excited for it, because it's like the way that Catherine describes growing up in that kind of atmosphere, where it was so common to hear names like Kwame Nkrumah, to hear about Gandhi, to hear about how all of this was connecting to King and the civil rights movement, to hear about Fidel Castro in Cuba. Like part of it is like, it is exactly the creating of a sky for young people, and to create a kind of person who is so committed to peace and to fighting for freedom within American society, but as part of this larger concert of humanity, which is striving for a new world. And that's ultimately, like, we believe that young people can be cultivated in that way again, because that is what is necessary. And yeah, because I think that people will sometimes look at the Free School and be like, oh, like, why are you guys reading all the time? Like, what's and actually, yeah, Wayne Curtis on Facebook had a question, or more of a statement about, there's so much to read in terms of practices for withstanding both the local as well as the global reciprocity of the world capitalist system. And like, that's a question of like, why read? Like, what is the point of reading? And like, for us, it is the creation of, what others have said, like the creation of a sky, especially for young people, but also, to give people the tools to be able to live for something, and to give them the tools to actually be able to struggle on their own terms, and not on certain terms that are set by the ruling elite and by those who are supposedly like the culture trendsetters and all of that. And yeah, Stan also had a comment which I really like, where he said, another Baldwin mentor was the visual artist Buford Delaney, who taught Baldwin a new way to see. And so, building off of that, Baldwin tried to teach America how to see in a new and a more expansive way. And yeah, I think Buford Delaney has come up in the Free School in the past, and yeah, I'm really grateful for just those conversations, because without this, like, I wouldn't have been exposed to any of this tradition, but also what it shows in terms of like the tasks and the possibilities of this moment and where that can lead for the future. But yeah, all of this was making me think about like our conversations with Catherine, and how much we view things in an optimistic way, and how much we view the role of knowledge and what can people know, like in this time when so much knowledge is suppressed, information is suppressed by the media, by the ruling elite, but also just by the culture, by the universities and all of that. But for us, that like we're determined to actually be a force that creates a new kind of atmosphere wherever we are. And yeah, we're not pessimists in that regard.
Anyone?
Yeah. I want to add to that. And viewing ourselves, I guess, in the tradition of a Catherine Blunt and even a Martin Luther King Jr. And that, I'm gonna take the example of the civil rights movement, where King looked at Black Reconstruction to try to see what we want to create a new American people. And so we start by looking at what has been done to see what's possible, and then we go out there and use that. And from our experience, we find out that actually, wow, this and more is possible. And we can take our experiences in our settings here in the Montgomery bus boycott and actually apply that to the whole country. And now we have a new richness to draw upon in our time to create a new American people. And so when we go in the year of Baldwin to go talk about these ideas with people and become a part of them, so that we can know each other and become one and remade anew, we can draw upon these experiences of the civil rights movement. But we're so blessed that we're going to be able to have our own experiences to add to that. And I think that the things that we can draw from our practice here in Philadelphia in something like a year of Baldwin and in Chicago, I think will respond to our urgent need of remaking a new American people here and everywhere.
Yeah. Sorry, just one thing to add, that it's like part of it is a question of like going off of what Eddie was saying and the Catherine interviews. It's like, what are the names that children hear, in their everyday life? Do they hear the names of all of these celebrities, of all of these fake people, like whether it's politicians, or do they hear the name of someone like Baldwin or King or Robeson? Like that in itself, it may seem like a small thing, but actually it means the whole world. That is, it's like a signpost or like a symbol of like what young people and children think in terms of like what they aspire towards, like what they think is possible. Because something that Catherine mentioned in the interviews is that the reason why people like Cecil B. Moore or people like Father Paul Washington were important is not just what they were doing for the people, but also what they represented to the people. They represented that fighting spirit. They represented a symbol of the broader Black community's ability to struggle for justice and to struggle for jobs, to struggle for equal treatment in the city. And like we think that like those it's like symbols that actually have meaning for people and not empty symbols or empty symbology. And that's part of the rationale for like, why do we uplift these names so much? It's because it gives like all of the people of the city, like we want this to become part of people's worlds again.
I wanted to add something. I was going to go slightly into AI because a lot of this conversation is reminding me of my academic training in like statistics and modeling, because everyone's bringing up the word like probability. But I know we wanted to go into like a more extensive conversation in line with Hegel and in line with philosophy. So please stop me if I go too far. But no,
you ain't going too far.
So just for context, like my background was in statistics and modeling and like coding and all of that stuff. But I think at some point it became useless almost to myself and to interpreting and understanding the world. But this conversation actually really has made me reconsider the applications of that. And a huge part of statistics is this idea of possibility and probability. Possibility meaning like, what are the certain paths that one can take, or what are the certain outcomes that can come out of a certain action. And I think what Jeremiah was bringing up and responding is that for us to talk about Baldwin, to talk about King, actually introduces a possibility. Because if children in this world are brought up with only certain examples of who they can become, right? I guess some figures that we've mentioned, like Ibram X. Kendi or an Obama or celebrities, I mean, sports celebrities, social media celebrities, then those are the only possibilities that children can really think of in terms of who they can become. But in free school, we're trying to introduce or reintroduce other examples, other possibilities of people that we can seek to emulate, people we can choose to become. And I think that's also, we brought in for the Korea event. Sorry, what was the name? Oh God,
Who?
On the panel. No,
Garland?
Yes, we brought in Garland Nixon, and one of the pieces that he mentioned was, people seek for a vision and less so than the people. And Garland Nixon was a great panelist, and I think we do agree on a lot of things. But I think that was a slight thing that I would kind of counter, which is actually people look towards both a vision, but also examples of who leaders are, because other people give you an example of who you can become and who you can sacrifice and struggle for. And I think that sort of covers the possibility piece, the human element of possibility. Because we're essentially saying no, the possibilities that are being offered to people, to us, to young children are not sufficient. And then I think the other piece is on probability. Actually, a lot of probability that is taught in undergrad or in modeling is very deterministic. It's determined based on what data you're fed, and meaning what these models are built on, and historical trends, and accounting certain percentages of how likely things are to happen. But I think one thing that Jeremiah mentioned earlier is it might not always be the events that have the greatest probability as determined by these models that will determine the future. Sometimes it can be outliers. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be the least expected, the rare occurrences that can change the future. And the reason for that is the human element. Human beings can change the probability of certain possibilities that happen. And that's exactly what also we're trying to do with the free school, which is that in highlighting and uplifting certain leaders such as King and Baldwin and Du Bois, it also increases the probability that individuals themselves are able to sacrifice. And how do you include that in a model of human beings actually doing something against their short-term interests for the greater good, in sacrificing? I don't think that's something that AI, simple models, or even more complicated models, have been able to capture. Because how do you even capture that? I don't know. I guess, yeah.
Well, because I think the whole thing about modeling too is that it depends on your assumptions. Fundamentally, I feel like models depend on assumptions. And I feel like by assumptions, it's what data do you have to take into account? But then also, what are your expectations? I think models are exactly about expectations and assumptions. And in that too, it's what is the logic of how you weight certain variables? And I think a lot of it too, thinking about the Catherine interview, I feel like one of the things that really stuck out to me was how much she emphasizes how her upbringing just made her fundamentally want to be on the side of the people, the right side of humanity. And so the concepts that she brings up are literally the beloved community. And I feel like it's not just it's actually very qualitatively different, I think, in terms of if you look up to a celebrity, then it's I want to be successful, I want to make money, things like that. But I feel like with someone like King or Robeson, this striving to do something for all of humanity and to sacrifice, I feel like just gives a new logic of human possibility. And I feel like that actually is kind of why I've been really drawn to Paul Robeson or Kim Il-sung, this Juche idea, where actually humanity can determine new logic. And I feel like the thing is that all of this talk about AI is that nobody actually really seems to know what the logic of AI is. off of like, because I think I was reading about how like basically the intelligence is like different like levels of transformer networks or whatever, and no one knows like what's going on in there. And so at best, you would assume that the AI algorithm is like building from like its own assumptions, like what it thinks human logic is. But it's like, what are all the assumptions that have to go into that? And yeah, like also the thing about purpose that I think Serafino is saying, which is that what motivates a human being to strive to like be on the right side of humanity. Like I feel like that internal motivation or striving just fundamentally is very different from what an artificial intelligence's like motivation or striving might like striving. I don't think there is a striving. I think the only like possible like purpose or motivation is like to be right. But that like objective like idea of rightness is like baked in or built in by like whoever is like doing this building. And I think like this thing of like what is true or what is right in an AI is just fundamentally different from like human morality, like this feeling of, oh, I want to do the right thing. I want to be on the right side of humanity. And so, yeah, I just think like this thing of like, I guess the moral dimension of knowledge becomes much more important, like not just the morality, but like the human spirit that is embedded in knowledge. And I think that's why reading Hegel is important, because knowledge is not just like cold facts that would exist like if humanity disappeared off the planet. Like knowledge is actually imbued with like the spirit of the times or like the spirit of history, like the collective struggle that humanity has been like striving for through time.
Wait, let me say, because reiteration, the title of the Baldwin year, the year of Baldwin, will be God's Revolutionary Voice.
Wow.
Yeah, and yesterday we celebrated Good Friday. Yes, Emily, I know, but like, all right, so it's so cool that you're saying that, Mary, because I was just thinking about how we were talking about like Jesus dying on the cross because he had to serve the future. He had to serve this mission that he had to die in that sense, but it's not like he did anyway. Or even King accepting the fact that accepting death, knowing that it can happen, but still standing on principle, still standing against the war in Vietnam, still going to Chicago, still dealing with other people abandoning him. Like what's right? What's the right thing to do in that situation? Like the right thing to do depends on who you're talking to. Do you become silent in the face of injustice, or are you able to stand up on the basis of like wrongdoings, like on the basis of the fact that war is actually the degradation of labor, of the fact that like slavery making human beings property is wrong? Like, what is the basis in which you choose or do anything? It was so interesting yesterday when we had celebrated Good Friday with the Church of the Overcomer, and we're able to have opportunity in participating in that service and learning and communicating with other people at the Church of the Overcomer. And there's just so much human dimension that we were talking about. Like one man, he was talking about abandonment and how he was abandoned by his, in a lot of ways, not solely just because of wrong or like evil demeanors, but like his parents split up. And so his dad, whom was somebody that he regarded as a figure to look up to, had to leave. And he felt abandoned by his dad. He felt when his mom had cancer, I believe, when he was like 17 and died, that, well, how could she leave me And I don't know the right word for that feeling. He felt lost with that. And this thing about trauma, like this is like a whole effect, like history, like how does that affect the brain and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the question of like Jesus having to die and prepare his mom, which was, because there was another word, I'm forgetting the word, that the woman did in talking about Mary and Mary's predicament, which is the same predicament as Emmett Till's mom, who saw her son being killed by white supremacists and racists, or Martin Luther King's mom, who saw the CIA and FBI kill Martin Luther King. And it's like, well, the right thing to do in all of this human history, it's just so it's a thing that makes me feel like I'm staring out into like this this kind of this like moral edifice, this like philosophical like meeting of the man type of thing, like meeting your maker. That's and that I think is something that we're talking about too, like the choice of the future, saving the world and all those kind of things, whatever you want to go to, has immediate significance. And it has to deal with the fact that even if it might seem like the wrong thing to do in the short term, in the long term, actually, because that's also the critique of political education and studying Du Bois and Baldwin. Like, why read when there's always something to do, like
Right.
stand up against some, smaller thing. But well, actually transforming the human spirit and transforming yourself to meet the level or the standard in which that Jesus died for our sins, or that Martin Luther King stood up against the war in Vietnam. That is why we study, and that is why we are striving to create a better world. Yeah, that made me think about that.
Wow.
Oh, go ahead, Meg.
No, that was really beautiful. I mean, just thinking of the purpose of education. I mean, knowledge has a moral, it has a moral imperative attached to it. Attached to learning is the moral imperative, which is part of why our society is so broken, because we've separated knowledge from morality and the responsibility to our fellow human being. I just wanted to read, I mean, also what you were saying, I think also what Alice was saying, just reminded me of this thing of what is folk culture and folk art. What are the logics behind it? And how is this connected to the logic of history? I just wanted to read this quote from Paul Robeson's essay, Songs of My People. And he says, folk songs are, in fact, a poetic expression of a people's innermost nature, of the distinctive and multifaceted conditions of its life and culture, of the sublime wisdom that reflects the people's great historical journey and experience. So I just think that's remarkable, because obviously it's everything AI cannot be, but it's also this thing that people have created, and how there's a logic to it, there's a movement to it, there's a historical collective wisdom and experience, and just what does that mean, and why should we study and practice folk art and folk music and carry it forward? I just to add that to the discussion.
I wanted to go back to some things that Nuri and Serafina said, like, because I also was going to, I was also going to talk about Jesus, which is why Serafina, I was like, when Serafina started speaking, I was like, yeah, like, I think we're on the same wavelength, but I really liked what you said, Nuri, when you said humanity, like, when you were talking about Robeson and Kim Il-sung with Juche in particular, this thing about, like, humanity can come up with new logic. And like the reason why I find that so deep, I'm really interested in this is like, yeah, because then you also said like I'm in some ways I'm just reiterating what you said, but you also said in there you're like, because then it makes you, because there's the question of, well, what is true, what is right, which then Serafina riffed off of with Jesus, this thing of like, well, it's like what Coretta Scott King said like about King, but you could say it for like someone like Jesus too, which is like, what manner of man is this? Like literally, like Jesus died on the cross to serve the future. Like what, I feel like there's something philosophically, or there's a logic, like man makes that kind of logic, that leap. There's something deep in that. Because the reason why I was also going to talk about Jesus was and like I feel like you helped me clarify it, Nuri, with what you said about that when talking about Robeson and Juche and Kim Il Sung and why that's so important, like that wavelength is that humanity can come up with new logic. Is like I was when I was preparing for the Good Friday service at the Church of the Overcomer yesterday, I was looking at Harry Belafonte's interview for King in the Wilderness, like the whole thing. And he said something so interesting. And I really feel like it's because of like the time period in particular that he was raised and like that generation was raised in. But he said something so interesting where he said, the only two people I can think of who compare it all to what King was able to do. And when he said do, he didn't just mean action, but like the kind of philosophy, that logic, there's something new like that King contributed to humanity, that expanded humanity in new ways. He's like, the only two people who can ever compare to King are Gandhi and Jesus. Like that's what Harry Belafonte said. And I feel like there's something deeper in that about like, to me, I'm really stuck on that because I feel like there's something deep. And in some ways I do connect it to Juche, like the way Kim Il Sung said, man masters something. Because what kind of leap philosophically do you take, like for Jesus on the cross to serve the future, or King to make peace with death, or Gandhi like in the worst, like the most colonized times, like to make a certain leap, to say like I don't belong in the colony of time, I serve the empire of eternity. You know, like there's something, there's something in this that I feel like is worth exploring. But I wanted to bring that up because I read that when Harry Belafonte said that, I was like, yeah, that I feel like that's it. Like I feel like there's something very deep you're saying here. And okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I don't
Go
mean
ahead, let her finish first. Go.
No, I think I was basically finished. And I also I wasn't sure if Sade also wanted to say something because I kept seeing like Sade move her arm. I wasn't sure if she wanted to like speak or she was just listening. Okay.
No, I didn't mean to cut her off because I do that and I'm like, I get excited. I know. I just wanted to add just one idea because of Du Bois's Immortal Child. And I was thinking about that because, there's a lot of girls in free school and stuff. So, like, it's weird how we think sometimes. We get very emotional about things. Oh, we all do. And I think we let the boys get more emotional because, like, we're emotional, which is good. But just that, like, I don't know. I think, like, what we're saying is that human beings can make new logics. But, like, the free schools also had a logic, you know, or like we've been talking about, or developing a new framework of thinking. That's also why we celebrated the 10th anniversary, to explain what it was and help develop it further. And I think it's just interesting because almost everything that we seem to think about kind of touches back at the same core, which is what actually carries this moment forward. And we come back to it, Gandhi, King, and Juche is a part of this because it's talking about like the human being being able to think for themselves. And that's actually what will free people today. And I just think it's really interesting because, I just wanted to throw in that concept. And then also to say that like Du Bois, King, Baldwin, and like we're supposed to read Hegel right now, but we haven't touched Hegel yet.
That's all right.
No, but I just think that's also like it doesn't mean that we don't need Hegel.
Oh yeah.
But we've also talked about how we depend on Du Bois for a lot. And yeah, what you're saying, Emily, just reminded me of the immortal child concept.
I just wanted to quickly add that the year of Baldwin, the thing I'm most excited about is this like public reading groups all over Philadelphia, because I think what Jahan was saying, that Baldwin is definitely read, but read in a very specific way, which reduces him and does not make him accessible to people as an example whose lives we are supposed to follow, like either as a queer man or even a bitter man, a bitter Black man, and one thing I wanted to say was last year when we did that public reading group in the Free Library for the 75th anniversary of Indian freedom struggle, I have to say it was the most transformative experience for me personally, because it made me realize, it basically proved this thing that we have said in free school before, that the messenger is the message. And by the example of the lives you choose to live, and by how you articulate ideas to people you're meeting even for the first time, it showed that you can build principled relationships on the basis of ideas, and not on the basis of, oh, you're my friend, or we believe in this, we belong to this community or this identity group or whatever, but based on ideas. And that really, I mean, it transformed me in a way. And I think these reading groups are going to be so important, because it's people will see the difference between how Baldwin is talked about in academic circles, and it will be a way to see Baldwin anew, like in a complete, like we've been talking about, in a new knowledge category, with a new logic, to supplant that. Yeah, I think I just want to add that.
I think just on the point of Baldwin being a bitter Black man, when I started reading Baldwin, like really reading him, not coming from the point of queer politics or anything like that, actually reading him, I actually had the impression that he was an extremely harsh critic of white people. At the same time, he was so empathetic. He was so hopeful. He was so optimistic about the same white people. And one of the things that he says in The Fire Next Time, I was trying to find it, was that the white people need love from the Black man. And it's mind boggling. I still don't understand it completely, but it is just a concept that I think that these reading groups and the entire year of Baldwin is going to get out there, and people need to understand these things, in the same deep manner that it was said so many years ago, that you have to propagate love between these two, between communities, between um, conflict is not going to get you anywhere, but it's love that is going to solve these conflicts that you have in your head, or even that's out there. I think, yeah, I'm really excited about everything about the year of Baldwin, and I think personally he's helped me understand a lot about this society, about myself, and amazingly about Indian society as well, because I think his words transcend just one community or one nation.
Yeah, regarding Baldwin, Stephen Palmier on YouTube says, scientific socialism is the authentic connection with the full spectrum of experience that acknowledges the essential nature of human unity. And Baldwin articulates this essence with razor sharp curiosity. And actually, yeah, it gets to an interesting question of like, I think it's come up in free school before, but like, what is quote unquote essentialism? And is even saying something like achieving a new nation, is that essentialistic? And I think it was Doc who brought this up before, but it's like, what is wrong? Like, what is wrong with the idea of an essence? Like, is there actually anything wrong with that? Because if anything, like one, you could like on the maybe on the dissenting view, you could say like, oh, like essentialism means that you're trying to box people in and that you're not giving weight to the full spectrum of human diversity. But I think the way that Baldwin would articulate or that we think is that actually like when we talk about essences, it's more of an indication of like human capacity to cohere and to develop in new ways and to achieve something new and to achieve a new kind of unity. And then is it okay if I read Danny's comments too on the AI stuff? Okay, yeah. So Danny also says this is relevant to Hegel and the AI conversation, but he says the whole of the science of logic is, in a sense, already said by the fall from Eden to Christ's resurrection, according to Hegel. And he cites the reference. And he says, of course, when we become irate or angry with AI, we are becoming mad with ourselves. It is objectified humanity. AI is human potential. I feel that the suspicion of AI is driven by the fear of being replaced in society, meaning that the problem of AI is a social problem, not an AI problem, really. Hegel puts it succinctly. The fact that human beings say, quote, we are animals actually means that we are not animals because we reflect on these questions, because we ask ourselves, what is man? And so that we even ask the question of, is AI like a human? The fact that we have Turing tests, that we write science fiction about robots turning on us, all of this means that we are actually different. And yeah, I think it gets to an interesting point about like the AI conversation where I think one of the the underlying assumptions that people have already, talking about like assumptions and models, but one of the assumptions of the people who are trying to push AI is that it's almost like you've assumed that human consciousness has already developed to the necessary extent and that all you need is for AI to continue to build on like where human consciousness has already been. But I think in some ways it's like the challenge of artificial intelligence is almost in my view that it's like the challenge of AI is that it challenges human beings to develop new consciousness, to develop new kinds of human intelligence in some ways. And yeah, because like I've been trying to understand like why this specific generation of AI is becoming so important or so I guess so controversial. But part of it, to my understanding, is that for a long time there was a kind of what's called a classical AI, in which you're trying to build like intelligence with like a computer intelligence, which is based off of logical propositions and logical associations between things. So you're trying to teach the AI how to associate one thing with another thing based off of logical, like how a human would normally think in terms of, oh, I associate this concept with that concept and that brings me to this concept. So it's like you're like building like logical bridges between things. But the way that like the new generation of AI, which is the more probabilistic version, is actually to completely like the only way that it's able to spit out things which seem more human is to actually become less human. Like it's like this kind of like the language models that are working is basically, I think, as maybe Nuri or others were saying, which is like a kind of quote unquote reasoning which is much more unintelligible to human beings because it's using like these vast data sets and these vast probabilistic pools, to which if you were to like to peel back like what's actually happening underneath the surface, like none of it would be intelligible to human beings because it's not being built with the kind of with the intention of trying to build like logical connections between things, but it's more just in terms of like raw like processing of probability and stuff. But yeah, I think like for me, the way that I guess there is an opportunity in some ways to see AI as a challenge towards like, oh, can humanity um, actually develop like new consciousness, like new intelligence, like new consensus, because the overriding assumption of the people who are pushing AI is that, oh, like humanity has gone as far as it needs to, and we just need the machines to like to build on what is already possible. And I think it also goes to like the Juche thing, because I think there's a way that you can interpret Juche as just a kind of rehashing of the Enlightenment, of rehashing like Enlightenment principles of like the possibility of man. But I think the way that we understand it, or at least like how I interpret it, is that like stuff like Juche or stuff like Du Bois, it's not just like, oh, going back to the Enlightenment, but actually saying like, oh, what is it actually the case that a new Enlightenment was emerging like through history from like basically the darker races. And it's not just like, oh, you're just rehashing old things from the European Enlightenment, but that is actually like you're building on human history towards like new principles of like what man is possible or what man is capable of.
I thought part of what Danny was saying too is like, yes, it challenges humanity to continue to develop consciousness and logic and to continue to advance that process, which has no reason to just suddenly end at any point. Like this whole thing about the end of history, like constantly. But I think also like this question of like, by asking what is AI, you're actually asking what is human intelligence. I feel like in this present moment, what it really challenges humanity to figure out is like, what is human logic? Like, what is it right now? Like, what are the logical processes that like human beings think through versus like this AI, like weird layered, like raw data logic? Because I don't actually know like if that is logic at all. Is it like, because I actually think that AI is kind of just, you have a massive pool of knowledge, like facts, and then through that you cobble together like the correct answer in a lot of ways, but it does not have like a clearly defined internal logic. Like, can an AI explain to you why it thinks what it thinks? Like why it actually like has come to certain conclusions through experience? Whereas I feel like a human being, like even if a human being has a very like comparatively limited pool of knowledge or facts to draw upon, there is like a logic that I feel like human beings can naturally articulate or like naturally develop. And yeah, because I think part of the thing too is that we live in a world that is so irrational, that is so illogical. And I feel like part of the weird thing is that I feel like AI is very like compatible with that system. Like when we've talked about like the complete irrationality of like the world financial system today and how like inhuman it is in a way, I feel like the present moment is asking like, yeah, like what is the human contribution? Like what is the human like fundamental like building block or like process of logic that allows us to come to a consensus about like what humanity is, like where the world is going? And I feel like that's kind of the question, because I feel like when people are scared that like AI is going to take over the world, I think to some extent, yeah, it's about like jobs being outsourced, but I feel like it's the question of like, what is humanity's like role in the world? Like, what is the logic by which like human progress or like progress at all is going to be defined? And like, what is the human contribution? Which I think is like why free school in this moment, like talking about AI, talking about like the role that human beings have to play in like basically a revolutionary process. Because what we're talking about is not just like a technological revolution. Like we're actually talking about a revolution like in human capacity. Because I think also this thing about like King and Jesus and Gandhi, like it's a leap forward in logic because it's like a leap forward in human capacity. Like with Jesus and King, like their example shows like, holy shit, like there's possibility in human beings that like you had never seen before. Like you didn't even know that was possible. But through like that level of sacrifice and capacity, like it's an example. And yeah, it literally like pushes forward. Like it shows the future. Yeah, because yeah, I just feel like this thing of like what is logic, like actually like what is logic, like where does it come from? Because I think this thing of like the inductive versus deductive, like I really feel like logic has to come from like some like basically human spirit. It can't just come from like objects. Like you can't just like take all these objects and then like be like, oh, like there's a thread connecting these. Like I feel like there has to be an actual thread and then the objects like move according to them. But yeah,
You know, sorry. No, please go, Purva.
I'll be short. It just, this conversation is also reminding me of the time where we focused on the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab's Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so, you know, this paranoia, I don't think it's paranoia, but these questions that we are raising for AI is set in the context of things like the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset, which basically challenges the fundamental question: what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to interact with each other in human ways? And where is humanity going? Is there a purpose to human life? And how does morality? So it's not, we're not talking about AI out of context to these questions, which is why I think like it's not just limited to saying AI is bad or AI is good, or whether AI could serve some positive role in society and all of that. It's because its fundamental starting point is based, or the people who are driving this its development is based in an anti-human position, and that can't really lead to anywhere good. Is my personal sort of beef with AI, because we're not really talking about it in a free context where it organically emerged from human endeavor. We are talking about it in a particular political context, in a time where the people who are driving this project are becoming progressively anti-people and anti-human. um, yeah.
I'd just like to try to add on to what Purba said, because I was thinking in the same way. And I was, because there are many discourses on AI, from the fanatically optimistic and utopian to the fanatically pessimistic and dystopic, so there are many ways that AI is being discussed, but I think what defines most discussions of AI is that the assumptions again, that humanity has reached a point of development where the development of humanity has created paradoxes created by humanity, but which human intelligence cannot resolve. In other words, human intelligence has gotten us to this point, and they consider this to be a moment of human overdevelopment, of human hyperdevelopment. Now, of course, built into that are all these assumptions that capitalism, the modern bourgeoisie, and the technology and science that either has been appropriated by capitalist societies and by the bourgeois elite has all come about because of modern capitalism. Parenthetically, that's why you can get an argument by so-called former radical and ultra-leftists that now I'm reading John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, because it is a return to the concept that the modern bourgeoisie and modern liberal theory represents the overdevelopment, or humanity reaching an overdevelopmental stage. That's why it's so easy to get a person, let us say, a highly accomplished physicist in India, who does not think like an Indian, he thinks like a Western white man, because his assumptions are that Western man is man as such, is the ultimate development of man, by which we're talking in here, Hegelian sense, of consciousness. Human consciousness has developed to its highest level, and in that development has created paradoxes, we could also say contradictions, but they would use paradoxes that human consciousness or human intellect is incapable of resolving. Hence, these paradoxes, which are logical, rational paradoxes. Let me explain what I'm saying. Because AI and machine intelligence is really a branch of game theory, of certain mathematical logics. Now, just a quick thing. You see, so the inventors of the machines that are intelligent, quote unquote, must decide. They have to make a choice. And everybody's right. A choice was made in the beginning of what will be the method and logics that drive these machines. I mean, let me step back again. But I agree with everybody that is saying that every discourse or all of the discourses that I have read on AI or Chat GPT or GPT 4 and 5, whatever, all of that is predicated upon certain bourgeois assumptions that humanity has reached its highest level, that freedom and democracy prevail in those parts of humanity with the highest degree of science and consciousness. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, the West represents the human future. And AI, in whatever iteration it is given, whatever people say about it, people that talk about it, whether AI can have a soul, whether it will evolve on its own, whether machine intelligence will evolve on its own and hence constitute, through intelligence, through logic, through reason, a new level of human consciousness, or a new level of consciousness, making it possible to resolve paradoxes created by the overdevelopment of man, but which man is no longer able to fully explain or to resolve, and hence artificial intelligence. And I'll just end on this, and I've heard a discussion of this where it was speculated that, well, what makes human consciousness unique? So some would say the soul, and can a artificial or imitative intelligence develop a soul? And people have argued that the intelligence of the machine can be self-generative of new beings. And this is where the philosophical debate is, which is another form. Again, the philosophical debate is a form, perhaps, this is interesting, one of the most important areas of the ideological struggle, of the political struggle. So philosophy, and here I think Hegel's going to be very, very important, at least the way he develops categories. all of these questions that we're discussing take us back to philosophical questions. What is possible in terms of knowledge? And has mankind or humanity reached the limits of what it can do? And therefore, a different kind of intelligence is necessary to resolve the paradoxes and contradictions created. And here we go. Western man, this gets us deep into Baldwin. Mm-hmm. As in white man, could the contradictions of this society, Baldwin says the last white society, AI would say, well, the last white society, the last white intelligence, if you want to put it that way, would be machine intelligence. It will resolve the problem of race, the problem of class, the problem of environment, and even the logical problems that mathematicians, Purba, cannot explain. Machines can do it. And in so doing, the machines will evolve themselves self-generatively, self-evolution. And this evolution, which the AI people would say we're only at the beginning of, will lead to a higher consciousness where the paradoxes of philosophy, of society, will be resolved, can only be resolved by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I actually have a question related to that, because this may be a very, very poor reading of Marx, but like, how would you think about AI as like a technology, like a development of basically like of human intelligence, but also a development of like technology in the way that like Marx would talk about like the Industrial Revolution, but the use of technology to essentially make, life easier for man, like through also the development of, like through capitalism to socialism to communism. Because I think in some ways, like this AI question gets at, I feel like it's also leading us towards like why we're not strictly bound to just like a Marxist view of the development of human history, but I'm not sure about that, because I think this is also related to something you were saying. But one of the when you listen to the New York Times people talk about AI, which I try to, like, people like Ezra Klein and stuff like that, the dangers that they construct in terms of why AI has risks is like, oh, like what if a rogue regime like North Korea,
right,
wrong kind of AI,
North Korea.
Like they use, but like that's their like they're saying like, oh, like these other people have the wrong philosophical presumption, like philosophical assumptions, the wrong morality, the wrong intelligence, and they would bake that into their own wrong AI. And we have the right ingredients for the right AI because we have the right intelligence. But but like all of it boils down to essentially questions of what is the right human intelligence?
Yeah, may I just say something? This is a very interesting thing. And, you always have to be careful in what can go for a Marxist interpretation or analysis, because so much of what we call Marxism has been reduced to, dogma and simple-mindedness. So I guess there's a way to talk about AI from a Marxist standpoint as technology representing or being the productive forces of society. And as these productive or technological forces develop, social relationships are forced to also change. And there's certain technologies which cannot develop under capitalism and therefore lead us towards communism. Okay, now I think it makes sense at one level But I think there's certain other questions that this discussion, this debate, and I think this is more important than the technology itself, because we don't know what this is, what it ultimately is. I didn't read Ezra Klein. I read Noam Chomsky's piece in the New York Times, which I thought was very good from the standpoint of language and thought. But my point is that that's our free schools' interest in this is from the standpoint of just what we've been discussing. What this says about knowledge and truth and the human capacity to use knowledge to create a world that is not driven by determinism, is not teleologically already decided, but through which humans, through science and art and imagination and all kinds of other things, can make a world that is livable for ourselves and all other species. Well, that's the debate that we want to get in. That's why philosophy is important for us, because too much is obscured in this discussion. And the return to classical, what they would call classical bourgeois philosophy, that is, philosophy generated by the revolutions that overthrow feudalism, the Enlightenment philosophies, all of that type of thing. So philosophy is central to getting into and unraveling, well, the paradoxes of the discussion about AI. Because that discussion itself is littered with every kind of contradiction, paradox, and every other thing, which also then raises questions about what Hegel called phenomenology. And for him, phenomenology was the science of human consciousness. You know, it's all kinds of things going on. You know, like you could say, is there phenomenology of artificial intelligence? I would say no. You know what I'm saying? But the question of the defense, I know a lot of people say, well, why are you going to read Hegel? That's a white man, an old white man from back in the days. You know, to me, you know, I guess to us, it's like, why not? You know, people say, I read Baldwin. Well, Baldwin read Hegel and Dostoevsky too, and anything else he could get his hands on, as did Du Bois. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's an argument to trivialize knowledge. But to clarify, and that's why, you know, Hegel said philosophy is the science of sciences. I think that still holds. And that is to say, a philosophy of AI, a clarification of just, well, what are people talking about? It's completely unclear, completely obscure, and speculative, and completely biased on behalf of the West and of what we might call white civilization. You know, there is no human future in it. And I think that goes for all sides. There is no human future. Well, I'll stop there. All of the implications.
Oh man, y'all got me even more excited again. Because for background, my background, I've done a lot of research in large language models and AI, and I kind of lost interest in it a while ago just because it just didn't seem that interesting to me anymore once I understood it, and only now that actually speaking with you guys does it have me activated again, because it's because of the philosophical dimension. What the AI actually is not that deep. I'm gonna be 100 with you. Like and the way it's so some background. This concept of a neural network and these AIs have been around for a long time, and they even fully understanding what they were on a broad scale. There was some papers a long time ago that said they are a universal approximator. They can learn to approximate, to imitate anything if they are big enough, and they just have enough data. And so the question, the past like 50 years has just been, how do we get enough information, and just how do we structure them so that it's easiest for it to approximate. And really, the big innovation has been, I guess, the transformer, which without going too much detail, every model has an assumption. The language they like to use, interestingly, is the inductive bias. And in this case, it's kind of deep, but it's not that deep in that each word doesn't have meaning in itself. It just has meaning in relationship to other words. So the only interpretability they've gotten out of these AIs is just that they look at the attention mechanisms, the attention blocks, and it's just a matrix. And when you put words together, you'll see that certain word. So each row of, like, let's take a sentence, and each entry in the row has a number which correlates, which says how strongly is this word correlated to other words. And so obviously it has a strong correlation to itself. And so, like, if you have a sentence that says "I am hungry," the word "I" would have a strong correlation to hungry, just because that word has a strong meaning in relation to the other.
Let me say this without trivializing what computer logics can do. It's like an infinite regress. And there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the question I gotta ask, even in what is possible or probable with a human regress? I mean, with a infinite regress. Regressive analysis in calculus. And of course, the analog computers deal with two things. It's linear, it's 0 and 1.
Binary.
0 and 1 in all kinds of combinations generated by a machine. The philosophical question, even at the logical level, is, does an infinite regress give all of the possible outcomes for humans? Is every possible human intellectual outcome the product of a regression analysis? Or is there something unique and special? This is all I'm going to say. Let's just take it this way. A paradigm shift. That doesn't describe it all. An imaginative leap. An unpredictable. Is there, even given an infinite regress, that you just run until the cows come home? Or maybe you get a quantum computing machine and you just do it, and you get all of this data and you just keep combining and doing whatever you do with it. Does an infinite regress represent all of human possibilities? Can we discover all possibilities, not to mention all probabilities, through linear analysis?
Yeah. When you put it like that, the AI says more about us than it does about itself. That's been the existential problem. The only reason that it's interesting now is just because the capacity of the AI to mimic humans has just really it's just pretty good now. It's not bad. Without going into any more technical details, all it's really doing is just mimicking humans really well. At best, there's some randomness that goes in there, and then it just learned what random permutations of words humans like. That's like the model they add to the end of it. They just generate a bunch of sentences with a little bit of randomness instead of determinism, and the model ranks what we like. And so it's
Just say one other thing. See, this idea that a machine can imitate the human brain, that's a huge part of it, and can develop, self-generatively develop a brain, quote unquote, how could I say it, better than the human brain. And see, that's this thing now of does a machine have the capacity not just to imitate human logic and reasoning, but to become itself through its evolution a brain.
Well, I wanted to say, Dog, this formulation you had, which is that the vision behind AI is that it's going to solve the problems humans are not able to solve anymore. I think
Problems that humans have created.
created by them, but unsolvable, a paradox. This was very interesting. I have to think more about this because I think it's really deep. And what the first thing it made me realize that this is also something you can say for the state of the natural sciences themselves. I think it's not complete, but there is a push or a movement towards more machine learning, data driven research, where I think what people are basically saying is that, okay, we cannot solve these problems. Human beings have basically advanced to this maximum stage they could by building the best computers in the world, supercomputers,
Right.
quantum computers, and now we are going to throw all the problems that as the human race we have not been able to solve, we are going to throw it to computers and see what that spits out. And the thing that it spits out will not have human error, so it will be it will be unquestionable. And in a way, another thing what you were saying made me realize is that the other suspicion or pessimism I have about the development of AI is also that it's an attempt to standardize ways of knowing and outcomes of knowledge, which is that it will be easier for people, because a few people control what aspects of human or what aspects of human intelligence AI captures. The outcomes that will come out of that will be considered standard for all human beings, and anybody who differs from that. I think this was also the purpose of what Klaus Schwab was saying in his Great Reset, that people who do not conform to this technological revolution where the boundaries between human and computers and robots become less and less tangible. You basically merge into robots or something like that. Anybody who questions or opposes this will just have to get in line. And that's very dangerous. I mean, that's yeah.
I think that also ties with what Jeremiah was saying about having good AI and bad AI, who controls the narrative.
Yeah.
So like, you know, the development of humans, we've gotten certain machines to do things a little better than us before. You know, the car, it goes hell of a lot faster than the person. The calculator, you know, it crunches a little bit, numbers a little better than us. Let's the thinking about the AI. I think we might say, oh, maybe it's better at doing something than us, but does that make it less than us? Does that
or more than us?
Or more than us? Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, the central philosophical question of making sense of these AIs that do things that we didn't think were we thought were exclusive to human beings is answering like, what are we? Yeah, no, a computer will never be able to do that. And so in that sense, I already think we're almost there and beating it.
I say this, Eddie, you know, but to say that, I mean, I was just, my thing is, but we have to enter the discourse about this. Mm-hmm. And I think just like with quantum mechanics or string theory or any of that, the great questions are not the experiments, but the philosophical assumptions. And so philosophy is indispensable to the unraveling of all of the contradictions and inconsistencies in the discussion about AI.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think about the words epistemology, and I forget what the other word is, but it's how do you know, and from that, what do you know?
Yes, yes.
And we at least with the AIs, you know, I told you I'm not impressed in how it knows, and so I'm not threatened that much by what it knows. But I still want to understand how the human knows to figure out what we can know, so that we can feel comfortable, I guess, with this discussion.
And the other thing is, has man, the assumption of so much of the discourse on AI, has man in Western society reached the pinnacle of consciousness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was just going back to Robeson's Primitives, you know, where he says, he actually says it's the opposite. The Western man is killing himself because he's taken away everything. The cost of developing the kind of mind by which the discoveries of science were made has been one which now threatens the discoverer's very life. The reason for this lies in the fact that Western man only seems to have gained more and more power of abstraction at the expense of his creative faculties. There's not much doubt that the artistic achievements of Europe, as abstract intellectualism penetrated deeper and deeper into the people, have steadily declined. It is true that this decline is partly obscured by an output of self-conscious, uninspired productions, which have a certain artificial grace, but discriminating people have little difficulty in distinguishing these lifeless imitations from the living, pulsing thing. And whereas he says, no, in the East, there's still a virility, because there's still this creative, intuitive way of going through the world. There's still these values. But I think that concept of a decline, like, is this actually the decline of humanity? Because it's the complete suicide and killing of the human.
But it's not, see, and this is so interesting. I'm so happy you brought out that Robeson. See, because to obscure the decline of the West,
right.
you come up with this panacea.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And then you sell it and you market it to all these financiers, and you can have your AI startup in Silicon Valley or in Macon, Georgia. You know what I'm saying? Whichever you want to make the quote global center of AI technology. And then you use that to talk about, well, we got to keep it out of the hands of Kim Jong-un in North Korea or Xi Jinping, because they would discover the evil uses of AI. And we're talking about the positive uses of AI, because everybody knows that white Western men are only positive, and so a whole fiction. But nonetheless, there is something that still has to be engaged philosophically. And I agree with you, Eddie. What you're saying about the machines themselves and how they work and the algorithms and so on is not that difficult to understand. It is the discussion of it that obscures all that you were saying.
Right.
Thank you. And really, the other existential question I tie AI to right now is the decline and the decadence of the West, and that we don't have a creative vitality right now. All we've been doing, similar to the AI, is just piecing together what other people have created, and we're not able to renew ourselves right now. And so you see an AI doing that because we don't have any other good ideas, and we're just like, oh my God. What is of us, since we don't have any creative vitality? If this machine is pretty much doing what we've been doing, that's it. We're done. Because it might do it better. It really might, and that's okay if you have that creative vitality.
Right. Yeah. The parallel thing is financialization. Just this other, look how complicated it is. That mean it must be better. But it's just running the entire society into the ground. I mean, what's the point of being smarter and more efficient and you're making bigger profits? I mean, you're also killing yourself.
Magna, I know. Hey, Shantanu, everybody. One of the things that we talk about in free school, at least among ourselves, is the existential impact upon white Western people of all of these Asians, Chinese and South Asians, excelling in the sciences, right? And how, I know Purba talks about it, Shambarta talks about it, how there is jealousy and envy among white men of Asians in the sciences, especially if those Asians don't show the requisite gratitude to white people for bringing us over here and allowing us to get this high-level education, in spite of the fact that white Americans, because most blacks and Latinos have been kept away from that, who were supposed to be the inventors of all this, are no longer in control of all of it. And so there is that kind of conflict. So here they can say to the Asians who are, excelling in the sciences in the American universities and so on, well, look, you were educated by us, so you must be like us. And so I'm always trying to, understand. I mean, Shantanu, you could probably help out on this. And the idea that if a person from India is educated in a white university, that person, one, has to show gratitude and humility in the face of white people, even though that person is superior in his out or her output than his white counterpart. You got to be grateful. The other thing is, you must demonstrate a fidelity to Western civilization and Western man, even with all their, quote, flaws. And even if you go back to India, be white, think white, act white, except that the problems of physics, let's say, unified theories of everything, will be solved by AI. This is beyond human resolution. So the Indian who is an expert in, let us say, string theory, and no particular person, this is hypothetical, who's an expert in string theory, must adopt the Western line, not the Eastern line, not the Indian line. That India has produced great mathematicians, and great mathematicians will be produced again, not in the West. So let me shut my mouth on this. This is also this discourse is a part of a concept or a belief in Western civilizational superiority.
Yeah, I think is it cool if I read? There's been a lot of comments in response to the discussion around AI, and I think one of the really interesting aspects of this is how it's being framed in different contexts and for different purposes, because it is like this discussion around AI is like a key component of also like the new Cold War, like it's almost like it's framed in the language of an arms race between primarily the US and China. But it's not just a technological arms race, but also it's almost like a philosophical and ideological arms race too, because what a lot of people, or a good amount of people, were talking about, like one interpretation of AI is that BK says it is the same problem with all other scientific innovations throughout modern history, which is the intention and direction of the mind behind its development. And people are basically saying that AI is a tool similar to other tools like nuclear energy, in which the issue is the intention or the condition of the human mind behind its development. Todd Doherty says, to paraphrase my teacher, DJKR, I don't know who that is, maybe he could clarify, which seems to align with what Nuri was saying, hope and fear are both required for sentience. And then Stan Wood says, in the book Superminds, Thomas Malone shows how computers can help create more intelligent superminds simply by connecting humans to one another in a variety of rich and new ways. And although it will probably happen more gradually than many people expect, artificially intelligent computers will amplify the power of these superminds by doing increasingly complex kinds of thinking. Wayne Curtis says, capitalist class development of society has left out the creativity of its human commodities, its consciousness that hasn't been allowed to contribute to humanitarian globalized existence. Then BK, okay, and then Daryl Waistline Mitchell says, Western culture is degenerate, and predatory capitalist assumptions or are bourgeois frameworks and conclusions about possibilities. Human consciousness is the ability to recreate ourselves anew as society passes from one qualitative state to another. It is the ability to become increasingly humane. And he further adds, philosophy may be called the science of sciences, probably in the sense that it is, in effect, the self-awareness of the sciences and the source from which all the sciences draw their worldview and methodological principles, which in the course of centuries have been honed down into concise forms. As a whole, philosophy and the sciences are equal partners, assisting creative thought in its explorations to attain generalizing truth. And then Danny Jacobs says, AI is trained on weighted probability distributions, and that it's trained on a set of data. And then adds that Rousseau said in 1754 that physics might be able to explain better the mechanisms of the brain and nerves in the future, but it cannot explain the spirit, which is not reducible to causality. How would you explain freedom, for instance? For freedom to be true to freedom, it must be free, hence the necessity of dialectic to demonstrate freedom. Our criteria of the AI being good is accuracy of its practicality, and we don't judge the AI as being cute or silly or endearing in its forgetfulness, for instance. And then Stan Wood says, artificial neural networks usually simply called neural networks or neural nets, are computing systems inspired by the biological brain networks that constitute animal brains. But one of the advantages of neural networks is their ability to recognize patterns. One of the disadvantages of neural networks is their interpretability. AI is a tool.
Disadvantages is what? Say that again.
One of the disadvantages of neural networks is their capacity to interpret. Rather, because he says one of the advantages is the ability to recognize patterns, but one of the disadvantages is the ability to interpret. So AI is a tool that still requires human intervention through the type of AI is a tool that still requires human intervention, although the type of intervention is rapidly evolving. Emily says DKR is a Buddhist monk that he was referencing. But yeah, I think it's an interesting. It's like because it's framed both as like just a technological tool, AI, but it's also framed as almost like it's like not just something like the printing press. I feel like not just something like the steam engine, but it has broader philosophical implications because it gets precisely to like that which we consider the most human. And it's not just replacing human labor for certain things, but is also like, yeah, we see it almost as like the reflection of human consciousness itself, which I think past technologies have not really been targeted at, if that makes sense. But yeah.
I just wanted to address what Doc was saying about Asian intellectuals and Asian academics coming from parts of Asia to American universities for an education. I think there are primarily, and this might be too much of an oversimplification, but I think primarily there are two kinds of people who come here for an education. One with the express intent of integrating into this culture, and the other with the express intent of eventually going back, getting the education that they came here to receive, and then going back and serving their own community, their own country. And the first category of people are extremely open about this, this white superior who in the educational institution, which is one of the sort of realms of the ruling class, and how they exert ideological control over the people. And they're very open and subservient to them. They're like, yes, this is my goal. I am extremely invested in a life here, and my purpose is to eventually carry on whatever this person is propagating. And I believe that there's a distinct dichotomy of using science for the people, science for humanity, and then using science to serve the empire.
Yep.
So you can also say that, but I think that this distinction is often overlooked. And when we're on the subject of AI, I think that the people who believe that AI can be used for the good of humanity, I think they severely misunderstand what is good for humanity. Because it relates to a lot of things that everybody has said, that AI cannot understand spirit, AI cannot understand human motives, AI cannot understand human potential, and the fact that we have not reached our potential as human beings, because that, I think, potential as its definition can probably never be reached. It's always something that you grow towards, you fight towards, you keep going, and as a human race will probably never reach it, and that's the point. So yeah, I think that these Indian intellectuals or Asian intellectuals who come here, I think that, and they're invested in a life here. They're invested in trying to make themselves part of this system. I think they've got it all wrong. I think they've got it severely, severely wrong.
Could I just say something just to transition? Because I know it's 1:30. I know Serafina has to get ready to go to work, sadly. But, we have said that we're going to, we finished last week this reading of Black Reconstruction that we did. And of course, we'll return to it. Probably when we do Henry Winston, the conference on Henry Winston, and then the year of Baldwin, that's going to be so interesting. Baldwin and Du Bois, or, Baldwin, Fire Next Time, and other essays, and Black Reconstruction. Well, however we do it. However, yeah, it's going to be so interesting and exciting. But the other thing is that we wanted, because of what we're talking about with AI, and because of the outstanding or continuing questions and problems in theoretical physics, as well as issues of social change and revolutionary change, that we return to doing philosophy, but by returning to Hegel's science of philosophy. And I guess to everybody that listens to Free School, and for everybody in Free School, but everybody that looks at us on these live streams, you will see people who are not super experts on Hegel or Kant or modern philosophy. And my argument is that you don't have to be that. I mean, of course, we will try to read and reference some of the best experts on Hegel and German philosophy. But it is, I think, so much of Hegel, and especially what we're going to read, maybe not today, but next week, is very accessible. Some few things we just have to clarify how he uses words. He's referencing a lot Kant. But the point is that Hegel does lay out in a critical way, and from his standpoint, the categories of philosophical and scientific knowledge. This is hugely important and valuable. For example, well, let me just say this. I think that Hegel's science of logic is a great contribution to humanity. In the same way that I think Black Reconstruction is a great contribution to humanity, and to humanity's consciousness of itself. In the same way that I think that Noam Chomsky's discoveries of language, and for those who are unfamiliar with it, what Chomsky established is that every human being has the same capacity for knowledge. For language, I'm sorry. That there are no superior and inferior languages. And because thought and language are inseparable, in other words, one cannot talk about language without talking about thought. One cannot talk about thought without talking about language, and the dialectical development of both together. Chomsky, and this is what, we are everlastingly grateful to him for, is to establish the oneness of humanity, the equality of humanity, by demonstrating that all human languages are equal. And hence, because language and thought is inseparably linked, that thought is a capacity of all human beings. Before that, behaviorist ideas had said that there were great languages and there were inferior languages. That, for example, Africa, from which all human languages originated in Africa. Africa is the continent of Africa is the site of the greatest linguistic diversity. In other words, there are more human languages spoken in Africa, and I think I'm correct on this, than are spoken throughout the world outside of Africa. Africa is both the origins of language and the most diverse linguistic geography in the world. Behaviorist, which is the same as kind of white supremacist concepts of civilizational supremacy, concepts of language, would say, well, all of that doesn't mean anything because the great or superior languages that are linked, and this probably kind of ties in with our AI discussion, which are linked to the scientific, technological achievements of Western nations, especially the 19th century going forward, after the Industrial Revolution going forward, makes their languages superior to the languages of the Bantu speakers of Africa, or the Pular speaking people of Senegal, or the Swahili speakers of East Africa. All of those languages and all of that linguistic variety and the origins of language in Africa, all of that is meaningless or insignificant because Europe has produced the great languages of humanity. Noam Chomsky forever, with his research and his theory, ended that. And we owe him a great debt of gratitude. But this is also, without its concrete manifestations, it is also asserted in principle in the work of Hegel. Theory of knowledge, categories of knowledge, modes of logic can be instruments through which we can scientifically interrogate, and the word critique means investigation, does not mean destruction, does not mean undoing, but these categories can be so important to our understanding of problems of science, problems of artificial intelligence, problems of the crises of of societies, economic and otherwise. So that is why we want to return to Hegel. And if I could just suggest for next week, and I think it's online too, use an online version. But the beginning of book 1 of Hegel's Science of Logic is entitled The Doctrine of Being. And the first chapter, I guess, in that is entitled With What Must the Science Begin?
Yeah.
Where must the science of sciences, meaning philosophy, where should it begin? And Serafina wants to read the first 2 paragraphs.
That's only because I was looking at it.
Yeah. Take it.
Okay. It says that it is only in recent times that thinkers have become aware of the difficulty of finding a beginning in philosophy, and the reason for this difficulty, and also the possibility of resolving it, has been much discussed. What philosophy begins with must be either mediated or immediate.
This is very important, something, I'm sorry.
And it is easy to show that it can be neither the one nor the other. Thus, either way of beginning is refuted. The principle of a philosophy does, of course, also express a beginning, but not so much a subjective as an objective one, the beginning of everything. The principle is a particular determinate content, water, the one, nous, idea, substance, monad, etc. Or, if it refers to the nature of cognition and consequently is supposed to be only a criterion rather than an objective determination, thought, intuition, sensation, ego, subjectivity itself. Then, here too is the nature of the content, which is the point of interest. The beginning as such, on the other hand, as something subjective in the sense of being a particular, inessential way of introducing the discourse, remains unconsidered, a matter of indifference. And so too, the need to find an answer to the question, with what should the beginning be made, remains of no importance in the face of the need for a principle in which alone the interest of the matter in hand seems to lie, the interest as to what is the truth, the absolute ground
of everything.
Of everything.
This, I know people. If you read from the book that she's reading from, it's a different. And we'll kind of reread this probably from this one that's on the screen here. But this is hugely important, what he is saying, and it begins, just like we're talking about the most difficult thing in the AI discussion or in the quantum mechanics discussion or in the string theory discussion is not the experimentation itself or the, quote, data that arises from that experimentation, but how we understand and explain all of that.
Yeah.
And this is what it is with the AI. It's at its core, it is philosophical. We discussed this before when we did the introduction to the science of logic. The great questions in quantum mechanics is not what somebody's experiment shows or doesn't show, but what are the philosophical beginnings? because now people who do experiments in quantum mechanics are making philosophical claims about the existence or non-existence of the world. And that's why Hegel starts where he starts, that there is a world, that there is truth, that we can know it. And then he is saying, but there are those who say, well, there might not be a world to be known. Mm. And we'll talk about all that. Just one quick thing, mediated and immediate. These are two very important concepts, categories in philosophy. Immediate means the immediate experience is all we can know what we immediately experience. And can we only know the immediate? Mediated means the conditions that make knowledge possible. So what he says at this stage is that it is both, not an either or. We'll talk about that, but pay close attention to you'll hear the word used a lot. I don't know how they use it all the time. Mediation. So we'll come back to that. And then the other, and I'll stop here, objective and subjective conditions. The subjective is the ego, the I, the me. Objective is all of that is not I, me, ego.
This is gonna be so cool.
Yeah. And it's so I think Hegel, if we could just, Serafina, just read this third paragraph, okay. The modern perplexity.
Okay. But the modern perplexity about a beginning.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Proceeds from a further need which escapes those who are either busy demonstrating their principle dogmatically or skeptically, looking for a subjective criterion against dogmatic philosophizing, and is outright denied by those who begin, like a shot from a pistol, from their inner revelation, from faith, intellectual, sorry, scroll for me, thank you, Emily, intuition, etc., and who would be exempt from method and logic. If earlier abstract thought is at first interested only in the principle as content, but is driven as philosophical culture advances to the other side to pay attention to the conduct of the cognitive process, then the subjective activity has also been grasped as an essential moment of objective truth. And with this, there comes the need to unite the method with the content, the form with the principle. Thus, the principle ought to be also the beginning, and that which has priority for thinking ought to be also the first in the process of thinking.
Okay, this is hugely important. And I guess we could just kind of end here. And everybody can, kind of get into reading it. But Hegel ultimately is not a skeptic.
No.
About knowing the objective world. He's optimistic.
Yeah.
But he's saying we have to proceed with proper methods, logics, and assumptions. So every great scientific effort has to ask the question where to begin. And I think this is what we kind of do in free. We'll always, how does it begin? Where does it begin? What is the originary moment? So that's all I would like to say. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about what Hegel means by phenomenology, Hegel's relationship to Immanuel Kant, and so on.
Okay, bye.
Serafina has to go to work.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining Free School this week, in the comments especially. We'll see you next week as we continue Hegel, and we hope that you have a wonderful Easter Sunday.
Yay! Happy birthday, Paul Robeson.
Oh, and happy birthday, Paul Robeson.
Yeah.
And Serafina and Jake.
Oh, and Jake.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.